recorded. The February 26th RMLD Board of Commissioners meeting is being, well, you guys call her in a second. Announced that being audio recorded, held remotely on Zoom and live stream.
Recording in progress.
Okay, so we'll restart. Calling the meeting to order.
That was good practice, though.
RMLD Board of Commissioners is now in session, February 26th, 2025. Being audio recorded, held remotely on Zoom and live streamed on RCTV. We'll waive the code of conduct. I think everybody's heard it enough. Nobody's participating remotely. Vivek?
Okay. We'll call the CAB meeting to order.
Okay, there you go. I think we're in session.
So we did invite Chris.
Yes, Chris is on here. RCTV is in here as well.
If you had questions relative, when you get to the home rule stuff, Chris can, if you depending on what you do, if it's simple, then they'll, if needed.
Chris?
Polly.
Okay.
That's fine.
Okay, liaisons, do we have anything?
So
Let me just, I'll go first and then Ray. I attended last night the turn back for the railroad.
Oh, okay. Where
they're going to build an additional track between Woburn Street and Willow Street. It was for the MBTA had a public session. It was a hostile crowd, as should be expected, quite truthfully. And I was concerned because actually it does affect the property where I live, so that's why I went. But one of the suggestions they came with the suggestion that maybe that could be built up off of Causeway Street instead of between Willow and Woburn Street, and that could be up there by Causeway Street, which is where the substation is.
RMLD substation 4.
Yeah, so I don't know. The MBA said, "Well, gee, we haven't looked into that. We'll go look at it and see what they did." They looked at other sites. They discounted them. They said, the site down here was not up to grade. Was too difficult for the engineer to see anything.
I was surprised. Yeah, I looked at it because it was a great starting point.
Right on that, they talked about whether they could just put another track by the station. They said, well, that would require the entire station be rebuilt, which we don't have the money for, and the money that they have funded for is specifically for the purpose of increasing ridership. Is what this is. This is why this is being done. And the people who live on Vine Street and those people in Hancock Street were all up in there, and it affects Tannerville and all those properties too. So it was a lot of discussion. Went on to like 9:30, from 7 o'clock to 9:30. So a lot of discussion. But I did bring it up because they did talk about potentially looking at the site off of Causeway Street, which is where the substation is. So keep tuned. Yeah.
Okay. Other liaisons? Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, liaison.
Yeah, go ahead, Ray.
Yeah, so we're going to get to my role as town charter committee member as a topic, so I'm not going to go into that. As far as the Killam School, there's been no new action other than, yes, they're going to put in, as far as the base price of the project, solar panels on top of the school, not doing the parking lot area. So that's undeveloped space. And that's fine for now. If at some point RMLD wants to develop that space, that's a future question for a future time and another discussion. But that makes sense in terms of them being an all-electric school to put the solar panels on it. I think that's a reasonable investment. And they did see the payback on that, but that's not news. That's what I reported out last time. The third thing, but I can't remember what it was. Anyways, whatever the third thing that I was doing, there was nothing happening on it, so no new news.
The one thing that we dropped into the email last night was green communities.
Oh, yeah.
We met with the town of Reading yesterday on green communities, and we've been working. So at the end of the day, I thought that we would need to do a motion to approve, but we can actually do that motion. We can do it at the March meeting.
Okay.
If you want, I can give you guys a quick, just a 30-second update if you want to add to the agenda. Otherwise, I can send the materials via email and we can discuss it next month. Just probably the right thing to do at this point in time. But I wanted to give you the option
If there's an advantage to this, if it's a quick motion
Yeah.
tonight to just get it, if there's a thing we need to get done, no, I'm
Oh,
fine
that's great.
to
Okay.
just do it. I mean,
So what you need to do right now is decide to add the Green Communities topic to the agenda for
for tonight's agenda, unless there's a problem with that.
Well, If there, you said you would send materials, if there's something we should read first.
I'll present this. Let me present, like,
And is
once you
this-
add it, I'll present it, and then you can decide if you want to do the
Okay.
motion next month or not.
All right. Is it this for April town meeting, I assume, to
Correct.
be set up? Okay, then it's fine to do it in March, probably.
Yep,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah. We're on the 6th.
We do, yeah, okay. We'll do it in March. Thank you. Thanks. Any other liaison? No? I think, do we have a member of the public here? No. Oh, yes, I love having members of the public. Please come, please, if you have something to say, come, state your name and address, and we just need to have a mic for you. Yeah, thank you.
Test.
Thank you for having me. My name is Charlie Protopappas. I live on 16 King Street in Wilmington, Massachusetts. The reason why I'm here is a concern over Carver's pole hits and the manner and the time that it takes to replace those. The pole that I'm talking about specifically is a pole on Dobson Street. I believe it's pole 9. It was recently installed by Verizon, and Reading Light came and did the transfer. The pole was originally hit mid 2023. I had called a couple times wondering what was going on. The pole was braced, but it was shaky at best. And just some background, I'm a 20-year lineman, so I'm not just somebody who doesn't know what I'm looking at. So my question is twofold. Why does it take that long to replace that, especially a safety issue? I understand Verizon does the pole sets in Wilmington, and that can be touch and go. But also, I understand that insurance will cover that Carver's pole for whoever hit that. What happens to that money? Where does that go? Because I'm sure that claim has been closed long ago. So what happens with that money? Who pays for that? The difference in changing it, having a crew come out, then charging it to that insurance, as opposed to waiting a couple of years. Everything has gone up. The labor has gone up since then. Who recovers that money? Does that get passed on to the ratepayer? And that's basically my question. And I see a lot of poles that have been braced, that have been hit, and that are waiting to get changed. So how many of these are out there, and how come they're not calling a crew out to do that? Because when I worked for Eversource, we used to have a 90-day limit. Everything had to get set and transferred to get that money from the insurance company. So how is that being recouped?
Are you ready? Do you want to take
Yeah,
this
just-
off the line, or are you ready to
Oh,
do
just
this now? Yeah.
a quick, yeah. So, did somebody call you today?
Yes,
Okay,
I
great.
wasn't able to talk to them.
Okay.
We traded voicemails.
Perfect. So two elements. In our territory, we work in cooperation with Verizon, and the poles in Wilmington, the maintenance of those poles are the responsibility of Verizon. They don't have the equipment to do anything over 55 feet, so anything over 55 feet, we take the responsibility for. So the transactions you're talking about all goes through Verizon. We handle the poles in most of Reading and North Reading. And so we, again, as an MLP, we are very responsive, and we don't like the whole poles. And you know, right? Whoever has the maintenance responsibility of the pole, they're, which is in our case for North Reading and Reading, we're also the utility company, so we can transfer everything except for communications. So, but in the case of Wilmington, all of the transactions and the costs you're talking about are run through Verizon, not through RMLD. So,
Okay.
And I will state this publicly, because it is our intention. We are persisting to work out a program with Verizon so that responsibility for all of the poles in our territory would transfer over to RMLD, because we actually think, and we can be much more responsive in terms of taking care of the issues. So that's our intention. That's the motion we're trying to move. So I think your request is appropriate and well-founded. But the challenge is that Verizon is the audience for that question rather than us. And I'm not trying to push you off. We legitimately push, and we work through engines and all the different programs that you're probably familiar with. But ultimately, we are at the we're at the mercy of Verizon in that situation. But we literally look at those polls. So our safety record was particularly good. We were just awarded, in fact, I didn't put on my DM update, but we just were awarded the ATPA diamond level, highest level for safety. We take that very seriously. We look at what's happening out in the West Coast, so not just making sure the poles are steady, et cetera, but also tree trimming, I mean, all the different things that you know intimately well that are required to keep the network safe and reliable. So we do that well, but we realize that it's not as good when we're not directly handling it.
Right.
So I mean, we can get into more details, but the big picture is we want to make that right. It's just, if it's less than 55 feet, we're at the mercy of the other party.
So does Reading Light have a vehicle to say, hey, this is an emergency pole?
Yes.
We're taking it.
Yes. Yes. And so and that's why I had the line foreman. I think he went out. Well, I know he went out to take a look at it today.
Right.
And
and it looks great, by the way. They did great work.
Yeah.
We
do take pride in it.
Yeah. The power is transferred, and now we're waiting on communications. But so I was just wondering, like I said, where does that money go?
That money is all that stuff is on the Verizon side. Okay. But we and so when we have those kind of issues, we deal with it on our side. But it's the ones that we have the maintenance responsibility.
Right. So you wouldn't bill the insurance company also, because there should be for that Carver's pole, because Reading Lights time that doesn't seem fair that it would go to the ratepayers.
I'll have to double check on that, but the primary, whoever's the maintenance responsibility, the insurance claims go through that entity. So we move very quickly on the ones on ours. I can double check and get back to you, and I have your contact information now. So, and I, with the request, I will follow up.
Sure.
But it probably won't be till next week. Just make sure I get all the information. But I will. And Charlie, really, we want the feedback. And we really, we've continued to improve and upgrade the quality of the work that the line crews do. And if you're a lineman, you understand. Yeah. Like our crews, they take responsibility.
Right. No, it looks great.
They are proud of the work they do, and we want to keep that running.
Yeah.
And it's also, as you know, right, it's literally advertising. I mean, it doesn't have our sign on it, but hey, that's ready.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I hate the fact that I walk my dogs and I look up at the power, look, it's just part of the.
How could you do that?
Yeah.
So I hope that helps right now, and I will get.
No, that's great, and I appreciate your time and.
Yeah, no, I appreciate for coming. I know, sure. But and the fact you came, we take pride in the work, so it's actually helpful to elevate it so that the board hears this as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your
Can I ask
comment.
a quick question?
Yeah.
Is there any way for you guys to contact Verizon on their behalf to see if something can be expedited, or?
Well, and that's what I gave. The line foreman is actually. I'll see what So I talked to him earlier this morning. I know he went out to but I know he also went through. There's a program that we work. Yeah. We have a good relationship with Verizon.
Yeah, that's why I was hoping that the relationship you have may be better than Charlie calling and being.
Oh no, in terms of Charlie, in terms of where the money goes, but in terms of getting it addressed sooner rather than later, we'll chase after it. I mean, it's already in process.
Because I did call the Reading Light number and the control room, and the gentleman basically frankly told me that it's my turn to call.
Okay. Well, I'll follow up on that as well. Okay.
So I did email and went back and forth with some people in customer service, and they were just saying, yeah, we've tried to call Verizon, and I know they went out a couple of times, and there was a new DigSafe. For a long time, it wasn't even DigSafe.
Yeah, well, DigSafe has a 30-day window.
Right.
Yeah.
So but they weren't even marked. Like the pole wasn't marked for DigSafe.
We are in the process. There's a concerted effort. So, condemned poles, double poles. That's we've got a deep list of work along those lines for our crews to walk through, and there's a concerted effort literally right now. Now, it has been for the past year and a half. at least 2 years now. But just, catching us, as you know, right, certain things have priorities, and right now, that's on the priority list. So I appreciate the feedback,
Yeah.
Charlie. I
No,
will get back.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for
Thank you.
coming out.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Please enjoy a snack.
Oh,
Okay, meeting minutes. Do we have 3 sets of minutes here? Thank you, Erica. Four? Okay.
Read the motion, you ready, Mr. Chair?
Well, do we do the motion? I do have a couple of things on it. Do we do the motion first? or-
Yeah, do the motion first. Move the RMLD Board of Commissioners approve September 11th, 2024, October 25th, 28th, 2024, November 11th, 2024, and January 27th, 2025, open session meeting minutes representing the recommendation of the general manager and the board secretary.
Second.
So it's a lot of minutes, many minutes. It's almost an hour. Have we had a chance to review all 4 of these? I mean, I know it's usually just kind of okay. Because I looked quickly at the 27th, I noticed a couple little things. Are we ready to vote for them? Yes?
No.
I'm ready to vote.
Okay.
I'm ready to vote.
I'm not gonna ask for a quiz whether I read them.
Yeah, it's fine. So let me just,
I read them thoroughly. I want you to know as the board
The
secretary.
board secretary.
well, okay, just look, page 7 of our board book. Okay. Where it has me saying on 2/3 of the way down that concerns over the OT were raised by Commissioner Coulter this summer. Well, I did say that he earlier, but I also said that it was raised by the board, full board over the summer, that we as a board had done it, but that's not in here. So I think it's a big distinction. It wasn't just that one commissioner raised it 7 months ago. It was that the whole board did. So I don't know if that's something, do you want to go back and look at it again or add it here and stipulate that that's what was said?
Repeat that again, please.
Well, it was that the concerns around this were raised by Commissioner Coulter at one point, but also by all of us as a board this past summer. That would be the addition, and also by the full board.
So
Also
what
by the
line-
board,
What line
so-
are you actually on? Can you?
2/3 of the way down.
2/3 of the way down.
Suggested that concerns around the 410s were raised by Commissioner Coulter. Comma, I would say comma, and then by us as a board is what,
Just say NBOC.
and BOC.
And
Sure.
BOC.
Sure.
I'll accept that as part of the main motion,
Okay,
Mr. Chair.
fine.
If it's-
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to read all, but I appreciate Erica always does a great job on minutes, and that you've got 4 of them in front of us that's like a full-time job, is doing
Believe me,
these.
once we vote this, it'll be in my email, probably in the next 10 minutes.
Thank you, Erica, as usual. So, okay, with that, then, okay, ready for a vote?
Yep.
Okay, then all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries 4 with 1 absent.
Quick thing while we're talking about minutes. I sit on a few committees. Does Eric have to type everything, listen over recording and type all this out, or does AI jump in and do a lot of this nowadays?
You may answer.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, it depends. What's going on right now is normally we'll transcribe by listening and then use ChatGPT to help with that. But in my personal experience, ChatGPT, if it misinterprets one thing in the transcript, your whole minutes are off. The content, so everything. So sometimes it actually takes a little longer. We do that because then we have to go back and check the transcript, like, okay, this is actually what was said, or things like that. So it's helpful in some ways, and still needs work in others, but we do use it whenever we can when it's beneficial.
Appreciate that, and thank you for the effort you put in. That sounds like a lot of work.
Okay. So now we are at the Charter Review Committee. That is Ray is our representative. Say again? Nothing.
So just as a procedural matter, Ray, one of the things the CAB wanted to do is include some language recognizing the role of the CAB. So what we would like to do here, it's okay, we would like to have a motion from the CAB
Okay,
to make a recommendation to BOC, and then you can then take a motion on your,
let me do an introduction, and then I'll invite you to make a motion. And then whatever comes out of that, we can follow that.
okay,
up.
that's
I would
fine.
like
No,
to do-
because
doing a
typically,
motion,
yeah,
because I want to shape why the motion is framed like it is. It'll help you understand it in shaping yours. So the way thank you. I welcome your input, certainly. Let me give an introduction, describing why the motion is shaped the way it is. And then I want to work through the questions just so that we have a discussion about them. The situation right now is it's an all or nothing thing. The Charter Review Committee isn't interested in editing anything, and what we're coming from here, we haven't really, it's an all or nothing thing kind of from this side. So it's, the motion is shaped such that there's three verbs in terms of what action I take, either approve, disapprove, or abstain. An action that is anticipated by the Home Rule Charter. But I do want to go through it to show, to have a discussion here, and certainly you guys, please participate in that discussion about where some of the issues lay, and lay or lie. I don't know which that is. Anyways, Mary, my wife would tell me instantly which is the correct verb. And while I think a good point might be some hybrid of the language proposed here, I don't think we're ever going to get there. So that's the approach I want to take. And that's my introduction. Can I get it? Are you ready? Do you have a comment on that, or do you want to, can we get it kind of to the specifics now?
So there's two things we're working on. One is at a higher level, we're trying to work the CAB into some of the policies. And that's something that Greg's going to be, talking about later. But it also makes sense that if you're going to talk about the Home Rule Charter, I think it's fair. And this is something that's been tried in the past and maybe has not worked, but it's worth raising, given the fact that, more than 50% of the revenues for RMLD comes from outside. It's just fair to recognize the role of the CAB in terms of the governance, in terms of the advisory role. So I can see it coming in two statements, one as a 1A and one as a modification of statement 8. Okay, so specifically, so if that's where we want to go, I'm willing to at least make a motion from the CAB. I'm sorry, I didn't have time to, distribute it in advance because I just.
Yeah, I understand. For our group, having that discussion and sharing your perspective is a good thing, and I welcome your thoughts on how you'd like to see that. But this language, whatever edits we might make to this language, will never probably make it to the.
That's fair enough. That's
Okay.
fair. No, I recognize
Okay.
that. That's something that.
It won't.
Right, okay, yeah, all right,
It'll record it. It'll be good.
yeah, good. No,
So
it's
this
captured,
is
it's
something
captured.
that we can also communicate back channel with the select board.
Sure,
Say that this is something that should be factored in. So this is, we
Okay.
can back channel that too.
sure.
So I'm not that great at wordsmithing these motions, but let me try to propose this. So that the CAB would like to recommend to the BOC that the role of the CAB in terms of advising for strategy, programs, and rates be included in statement 1A in terms of, it could be statement 1A.
I think you should, yeah, I suggest you make your edits to in the context of what the existing charter language is, as opposed to what these edits.
It doesn't, David won't.
Yeah, okay,
Don't matter. It don't matter.
okay.
No, I'd rather just capture his
Right.
his goal and interest in that, because
Yeah,
it's
okay.
not gonna get into.
Yeah, I mean, I can support what Ray's saying. I've
So-
put my head against the wall 3 times.
Yeah, yeah,
You know.
that's why the hairline is kind of further.
At least you have.
Really?
Okay, so in 1A, we would talk about the role of the CAB,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
And in 8, in 8, we would talk about, the role of the CAB in terms of advising or making recommendations to the BOC when rates are being determined, right? So this is about, this is about operating budget and capital budget.
So what is the language change that you're proposing? That's.
Well, no, the cab role in advising and recommendation of rates and capital budgets.
Yeah.
Okay.
Um,
So like,
To RMLD.
include in, it's one thing in statement 1 and one thing in statement 8.
in statements 8 and 1. So yeah,
So that's a recommendation that the CAB, so anyone wants to second it?
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor?
I'm adding that thought.
So,
Okay,
so that's, and so you can, Eric, I can wordsmith it.
okay.
Email what you wrote.
I agree because RMLD is unique in that we do have multiple cities and as much as a large percentage of electricity does come from the other cities, it makes sense to have more input from that. Normally an RMLD, a municipal light is one town, so in general, you might not see that. I think one careful, and the language is good because it does touch on the two main powers. I think one issue as we think through this is there is really two different frameworks that are being talked about. One is those rules and regulations and laws which govern RMLD and what is the governance of RMLD, what's its structure, how's it run, who's in charge, and chapter 164 and whatever subchapters that govern how RMLD is structured and run. And then the home rule charter is how the Reading town government is structured. So it's how government is structured, not how a business is operated. And those are the two, they're very different in terms of what they are. So when we look at the charter, these aren't laws. This is just structure of the government. And within that structure, there is a section 3.5, which says commissioners. And so where that collides is in the government of Reading structuring the commissioners and giving them the authority to oversee RMLD collides with the laws in which RMLD must follow in its operation. So when where the divide needs to fall is the structure of the Reading government can't impede on the ability of the general manager or RMLD to function as an organization. So how do you give power or authority to the commissioners without limiting the power and authority of the general manager to run the organization? So that gets to be where the line is and the perception of where that line falls. So if you go back and look at the 20 years of history that of the board, we're down to 2 5-year-olds yelling, yes, I can, no, you can't, yes, I can, no, you can't. So we're down to the point where there really isn't going to be any negotiation. We're either going to change something or we're not going to change something. But I want us to understand a little bit tonight of kind of what's being asked here, what changes are being asked. How does that dividing line between Reading town governments and Vivek, how the CAB might fit into that in a governance standpoint versus the requirements that RMLD must meet under 164 as a business, as an organization. 164 is actually a part, I think, of Title 22, and 22 is corporations. So under state law, RMLD is considered a corporation. 164 is municipal gas and light companies.
Mm-hmm.
So of the many 21 other different corporation types there are, the state law sees us as a corporation, and it's therefore separate from town government, except for that oversight responsibility. So,
And real quick, Ray, may I ask, the thing you have up is John Foyle's memo from February of,
well, I don't know what I have up.
oh, sorry, I thought I saw something.
Yeah, I just
Those line edits,
correct.
that is
Yeah, that's
John
what
Foyle's table from his February 2024. So we've had this, well, since October. We didn't have it between February and October or September, but we have had it for the last 5 months. And that's what you're showing us now.
Yeah,
Yep.
and I'm only using this as a framework. You're right, I did extract it, and these are these, so item one, there shall be a municipal light board of commissioners consisting of 5 members elected from 3-year terms arranged as possible. It's arranged so that they're equally distributed roughly across the year. That's sort of a contraction of what 164-55 describes several options that a municipal board might be structured. And out of that various structures that are in the state law, Reading has chosen 5-member board and a 3-3-1 re-election cycle. So the actual law says more than here, but this is Reading saying we're going to choose the 5-member board option, and therefore that's in there. But I want to just kind of make an example of this is not precise language coming out of the state law. It's a contraction. It's a summary of that. So it's not even in this, there are not edits to make it precisely like state law. That's accepted that this is a reasonable contraction of it and gets to the intent of the structure. Item 2, municipal light board of commissioners takes out have, hold, and exercise. To me, that is 3-for-1 lawyering, where they get 3 new words for every one they take out. There's probably reasons for it, but it escapes me.
It's $1,500 a word.
Yeah, well, there you go. So that's to me the bonus words. And then kind of starting the intent is in it, although there's a reference to Mass General Laws, Chapter 64 above, it's kind of, there is a statement inserted about other duties being consistent with Mass General Laws. I don't think it's a legal requirement that that phrase be there, but nevertheless, it's part of that intent of trying to get Reading to have its charter be consistent with 164. And I say, again, they are slightly different. Questions on that as I go through this? I do want this to be a discussion if you have questions as we work through this.
Can I?
Sorry. So my request is that we're gonna do policies later. So anything that you say here should not compromise the role of the CAB going forward. That's the spirit of what we're trying to accomplish.
Right.
And so if it's gonna get ignored, it's gonna get ignored. So I think we'll just make sure that the policies cover the role of the CAB.
And
so
so-
with the policy, in that context, if the policies are in place, do policies of RMLD supersede anything on this?
The word policy is an interesting choice that you made, because there's governance, which is the town charter. And then there is operation, which is 164 for RMLD. Policy is actually embedded within us, the CAB and the board. And I think in defining policies, yes, I think that is a mutual thing. And I think we should both have input on it. It is not the goal of the charter to define policy, but simply give the authority to the commissioners to set policy. In other words, you're not going to see the Clean Air Act. You're not going to see clean heating for buildings. You're not going to see other policy statements that relate to renewable energy or whatever else in this. This is governance. Who's in charge? And that we're given the authority to direct the general manager with policy and then let him execute that as executive director.
And to spin off and I agree with what you're saying. I think Vivek's true spirit here is what has happened as far as I'm concerned, again, over 10 years on this board, what's happened over the last year or so when we combine the 2 boards and we share information and work together. I think that gives CAB more than it's ever had that I've been on the board. And hearing the voice heard with the group instead of one person from each committee seeing each other's side. So I think we've moved more towards that as policy. But again, you can't change Mass General Law, you can't change the charter. But I think as long as the voice is heard or input's taken and appreciated, I mean, what Vivek's trying to do is make sure it's in there as writing so it does count. instead of just the word of each other saying,
Mhm.
we're gonna allow it. So that's where policy does come in, and I think it's more of a policy change as you describe it. But I think by combining the two boards and meeting on the same night, we've achieved more in 1 year than I watched in 9 years before that. And, but much better communication and.
Yeah, and I agree with you, Dennis. And just stepping way back, I mean, in terms of process here, the charter committee started 15 months ago, and we had an appointee 15 months ago. And this is a great conversation, and I just wish it was happening a year ago instead of now, because it's too late. They're not going to change it.
Well, they didn't change
They
10 years
They
ago.
weren't gonna change it.
Well, but still, if we, but
10 years ago, they weren't
but
changing it 20
They're-
years.
hold on a second, but they wouldn't change your specific thing, but
No, they
adding,
weren't gonna change anything no
Right.
matter what.
hold, let me
Made
finish
no
my thought.
difference
Let me
there.
finish my thought.
Made
That
no difference.
I think what I like where you're going with it in terms of it would be useful to have our charter defining where the cab does and doesn't and how the cab shall interact. Those would be good things to do. And if we'd been a year ago, I think we could have constructively had some language that maybe could have pushed forward and gotten in there.
Yeah, what I think too,
I
When
would
you
have,
talk
I would have
about the
backed, I
laws,
would have been in favor of it
you're
too.
looking more of, the cab exists because of the 20-year agreement, not the charters.
Right,
Not the,
Right.
Correct.
so
right.
we don't even exist in the world of
Sure.
everything else. But the respect of the two boards and the working group of the
Yeah,
two
yeah.
boards is where this all works. But we're really non-existent until it becomes the 20-year agreement. So we are a subset of everything else, and that's how we exist today. But I think these two boards, or this board has grown a lot by combining the two, and I think that growth should continue. As I mentioned to a few people, I gave my resignation because I need to step down, but I want to see this, and I'm hoping it continues as a group to work together and have the input, because I've learned a lot from everyone over there and everyone here by working together and being on the same board. So I think it achieves everything that Vivek's saying, because you guys are now listening to the cab for 9 years or 8 years anyway. We were just a meeting that showed up, and Dave, you sat at a lot of them, Phil, you sat, and people ran through the motions, but what we said didn't count. And I think the spirit of Vivek is exactly, making the word heard, and that's combining these meetings has done that. And then you guys follow Mass General Law, we're part of the 20-year agreement, and it all works together. That's just my 2 cents.
The one thing that I want to add is, and it's a caveat that having lived through the Wilmington pulling out, the many people in Reading believe this is Reading's light department. They can do whatever they want with it. In all truthfulness, and that's the one thing after I'm gone, I hope this is remembered that this light department is for the ratepayers and not for the town of Reading.
Pam, did you have a comment earlier? Sorry,
Yeah.
sorry, Phil.
Well, I was just trying to make sure I was clear as Ray was going through this, what the intent of us understanding these changes, which it sounds like will not get put into the charter. What's the goal of that?
Yeah, well, the goal of that is, I am going to ask for when the charter votes
Mhm.
to approve, disapprove, or have me abstain from a vote that they will take. I want you to answer that question, how should I vote?
Okay.
For you to answer that question, how should I vote? I think you need to understand the issues of having me take one of those choices.
And just to confirm, you had proposed these changes.
These changes
to the
had been,
charter committee.
these changes were presented to the charter committee through Phil.
A year ago.
The drafting of these was by Coyle, whatever the
Mhm.
law firm was. And presented to them as recommendations, and they have rejected them.
Okay.
And, but
But so it's the same as we've been through
Yes.
before.
The same
Correct.
discussion we had in the
Yeah.
fall, correct?
Right.
Same.
Nothing has changed. Okay.
so, and it's it's my opinion that adding the cab or providing hybrid language or accepting some or not others of these would be a better way to handle it. I don't think we're ever going to get there. Right now it's a yes, you can, no, you can't, and it'll be an up or down sort of vote.
I would only ask that because it's gonna be a long meeting.
All right,
We
so
got
let me-
rates, we go quickly through. 'em.
Yeah, well.
Can I just make one point
Yeah,
on
please.
the cab thing? As much as I'm in favor of having it added to the charter at some point, whether, obviously it's not gonna be this year, but whenever. You have to be careful because it is the other towns and this is Reading's charter. So if Reading charter is saying we need to have members from other towns, the other towns also need to agree that they're gonna provide members to the board, so I'm not exactly sure legally the charter can do that, right? So we gotta be careful with that. As much as I want it in there and show that we're working together in governance, we gotta be a little bit careful of how that gets worded.
But I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
We're not proposing to put it in there, so we probably don't need a legal opinion on that right now.
Right.
No, I'm not saying like right now, but I'm just saying like,
Let's talk.
Yeah, let's,
no, I don't think because we're talking about being changes, but I do think that if we ever get to the point where we're at that point of it, they're actually gonna accept some changes and we do that, we gotta make sure that that's worded
Yes.
correctly.
Yeah.
And it truly comes down to that the Board of Commissioners recognizing the CAB input, which you guys have done a great job doing, and be part of the policies and procedures to help you guys make decisions as well. And then that will cover unofficially on a charter, but again, we live in the 20-year agreement, so we're not going anywhere. And our voice should be heard. And like I said, all I can do is the 10 years I've been here, there were many years that we were ignored. And I will say that to anyone that was involved in the past. And I used to leave every meeting going, why do we come to this? And now I don't do that anymore. And thank you to the board over there that have built this relationship more.
thank you, Dennis. So let's, yeah, can we-
Yeah, so going quickly, there's a couple here which are a little more critical. Item 3, crossed out his duties, and just leaving the terms of employment in terms of the board's authority, over the general manager's contract. His duties were stricken because the duties of the general manager are specifically defined in subchapter, 56 or 56A. In which the general manager shall, and there's like a long list of things that you've got to do, Greg.
Yep.
A long list.
It's a long list.
And so it was struck because we don't really then have the ability to take away those duties. I would say I would not want to strike and his duties because we could add them. We could add maybe you're part of the green communities or you're part of something in town where your
Whether-
role as general manager is integral to that topic, and we would want to have you involved in a state action or some other action. So we couldn't take away duties that are established in 164, but we could add some. So I would say I wouldn't want his duties and be dropped out necessarily as a part of a wholesale change, because that still could be, we could add to that. Then the next 2 are crossed out in their entirety. And this gets to the heart of it. And this is where, Phil, the historian, will know that there was a general manager who was accused of doing bad things, and Reading said, well, we want to make sure this doesn't happen again. And they put these 2 requirements in there, which is that the board will appoint is the word, an accountant and a counsel, and they will report to the general manager for supervision and operation. And the idea was that somehow by the board appointing this person, we got our guy in the organization and it wasn't the general manager's guy, and somehow that was protective of the town.
But the general manager is your guy,
But, well,
because you hired the general manager.
well, but
Keep going.
that's not where the conflict is, because now the town charter is trying to put into its charter the responsibility of staff that the general manager manages. You can see how that crossed over now. It's not assigning the board a power or responsibility. It's assigning the board a person within RMLD under the supervision of the general manager. So that boundary kind of got crossed there. Nevertheless, there is strong feeling within the town charter committee that somehow this has value. And there's 33-year-old litigation, which everyone points to as precedent in terms of where that boundary falls and that whether someone can appoint to that. And, lawyers will line up on either side of that and tell you which way to go. But the feeling is on the charter committee that they aren't going to give this up because somehow they feel that gives them power. On the other hand, RMLD's advice and counsel assert that this kind of change isn't isn't allowed because we're putting staff in RMLD that reports to the general manager, and that's the general manager's responsibility. The fact is, we don't do it. This is not what we do. And there's nothing against the charter, the commissioners from recommending or suggesting or offering up someone whom the general manager might consider for the job. But it's ultimately the general manager's responsibility for hiring the accountant and the RMLD council. And I did look up the rule that people have cited a number of times, and you know, there's a reach where maybe there could be some language inserted in the town charter that would give the commissioners some authority over that. But I think the better goal might be, how can the commissioners get a resource that they can use to advise them, not someone who would be within the organization of RMLD. And I don't know what that language is. And I don't think we'll ever get to a place where we could craft that language. So those two are kind of where that battle line has been drawn, and neither is willing to kind of give up on that perspective. Similarly, item 6, the Board of Commissioners will approve warrants and payment of all bills and payroll, but crossed out and shall approve all contracts. Well, we do approve contracts. What is kind of more at issue is that the contracts have to meet 30B, which is a mass requirement for state governments to procure commodities. Well, we don't really procure a lot of commodities. There's a lot of specialized equipment, and the policies and contracts that I've seen approved do seem to go through a competitive bid process.
They do.
So really, requiring, and they do exempt for power purchases, which, yeah, okay.
That's not-
But nevertheless, this is kind of imposing a procurement requirement, which is not imposed in 164. And although from my limited experience on the board, we follow a competitive bid process, there are things which we can't bid that way and don't bid that way and wouldn't bid that way.
Okay.
So requiring that the board enforce that requirement is challenged. Although I think we do a pretty good job. And am I on track, Phil? Is this
You're
kind
on
of the-
track.
All right, so item 7 says municipal light board shall employ an auditor appointed appointed by the town of Reading Audit Committee. And this one is interesting. This is crossed out again with the idea that this is under the general manager's responsibility. But 164 56A, I think, does have a statement about the auditor. And there is a requirement. All accounts rendered to or kept in the gas or electric plant of any city shall be subject to the inspection of the city auditor or officer having a similar duties, and in towns they shall be subject to the inspection of the selectmen. So even in 164, there is a town auditor which oversees the books, and that is what we do.
Well,
So,
that's the presentation that we do each year,
right, and we do it though, that's my point.
but it's a presentation, it's not the audit function, it's the presentation of the audited results.
The auditor comes in and looks at the stuff.
It's not gonna make any difference, but just for clarity, that function is the presentation that we give to the town of Reading every year. And we are presenting, in fact, the auditor does
He does it.
he does the presentation of the audited results. But the auditor, now in our case, the auditor is, we use the same auditor that the town does. And that's what, this is not so much a presentation that you see there, this is the selection of the auditor. It's a small.
All right, so again, this is kind of,
It's a small.
well, it gets to that line again.
Yeah.
Here, state law says that town auditor will audit and and then this says something similar, not exactly the same.
Right, so when I was on the committee, I had recommended that this not be changed,
Correct.
because I think it's good governance that we use the town auditor.
Is there another
And we
page?
have the town audit.
Is that it?
Just a little bit more.
All right. So, again, if, well, I might wordsmith it, I would not drop that paragraph if we were able to get into the back and forth. And then finally, Municipal Light Board of Commissioners shall annual versus, calendar year, capital improvement program was switched to capital budget, a little bit of semantics there, but there the lawyer lost a word. We gave up 3 and he only gained 2. So we saved a little money there.
I doubt it. Been a lot of money has been spent on
Yeah,
the process
so,
of ratepayer money. Yeah.
but and then some change in terms of how the we communicate back to the towns. And I think this is where Vivek is saying that, how should we communicate with the towns? This language was changed, that it's the general manager, but we're talking about a political body reporting back to political bodies. It seems like that is a suitable job for the CAB or for the commissioners to report back to their towns on capital projects and finance. That's certainly not a requirement under anything under 164, that reporting back. So that is by no means a requirement of 164, these changes be made anyways. So you can see, so Vivek, did you had?
My main point was there should just be the recognition that the cab exists, right?
Yeah.
And that's it, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
and like I said, I appreciate what you're saying, but when you start talking about the law and everything, we don't exist until the 20-year agreement.
Right.
But then it becomes the general manager and the board of commissioners that have to feel that we exist so that our input matters. And so I can understand why the charter can't be changed, or it'd be difficult to change the charter to admit it, especially when we're out of town, 4 of the 5 of us. But I think the policies, procedures, and the 20-year agreement, the next time it's signed, should be adamantly put in there what the CAB's role is, because I truly believe that it was a courtesy, not a committee. And Phil's been on it long enough to see that. And I think everything you're saying makes all the sense in the world to show that. I mean, Wilmington's, I think, 40% of the business, or 50%, 60% of the business. But that doesn't mean we can govern what Reading does. It just means that, we're fortunate to have like nice rates and reliable energy and zero carbon, low carbon. So,
Increasingly.
I want to, that goes through the list, right, Ray?
It goes to the list. So I think, unless there are other questions, you can see where there's some places where there are edits which maybe over edit the text, and you might see where the town would say, I don't want all of those edits going forward. On the other hand, you can see where there are strongly held beliefs in this text, and a middle ground is not being sought.
So thank you. I would say thank you very much. That was an excellent presentation. I just wish we'd had it a year ago, because I think that's when we had the memo existed a year ago. It would have been a great conversation to have. We could have heard from the CAB. Maybe we could have gotten a piece of CAB language. We could have put it forward in April, May, June, and we could have had maybe there's a piece of this, but it didn't happen.
So in defense,
Yeah.
I have to defend myself here.
I'm
Okay?
not
Since
attacking.
you're attacking.
I'm
you're
not saying
attacking.
anything about you.
You are attacking. Let's be honest. You're
I'm
attacking.
saying that we didn't know anything about.
You're attacking. You've attacked me on this at least 3 or 4
We're a
times.
little out of order.
I am not out of order.
Go say your piece.
I basically had nothing to bring back. You see all these changes, they all got rejected. What do you want me to bring back?
No, it's just the
I'm
fact that
saying nothing's changed.
no, Phil, it's that they were put forward, and we had the thing that Ray has gone through so nicely.
If I had changes, I would have brought them back, but there were no changes.
Right, but these proposed changes were commissioned by Greg and existed in February
Right,
of
I like to call the
2024.
question.
No, before you do, I think, before you call the question, there was a meeting, and I just want to, there was a statement made about whether this is legal or not. And there is first of all, there's a new opinion from the town attorney, which we don't have. And there was a comment made by her at the beginning of the charter committee meeting, which is public. And I will now play what she said, because there's the referee of this is not me or Greg or Chris or John Coyle or Avery Freed even, it's the Attorney General's office on whether these things are legal or appropriate. There's a person called Kelly Dunnigan, who's the Assistant Attorney General in charge of the Municipal Law Unit. Kelly Gunnigan, she's the Director of the Municipal Law Unit at the AG's office. And Ivrea Freed had a conversation, and this is what Ivrea Freed recounted. What you're going to hear is Chris Haley introducing Ivrea Freed, referring to Kelly of the AGO's office, the Director of the Municipal Unit.
When
This
was
is 50. That's Chris Haley.
I spoke with Kelly Gunnigan, and she said that she's not able to give us an official opinion, but she's going to look at it. So I sent her the charter. She's still reviewing it. But she did say, sort of like informally, we've looked at this at least 3 times now and have decided each time that the provisions of the charter are consistent with state law. And so it would likely take a lot for her office to reach an alternative conclusion. It doesn't mean they won't, but, she said, absent anything significant, it's unlikely that their decision will change.
So the reference to 3 is
And so
2000.
hopefully we'll get more feedback from her and her office, but as of right now, we're still waiting.
That is the extent of so that is the only word we have from the Attorney General's office. They were asked again for the 4th time in response.
time.
She said three
Well,
times
she was
already.
uncertain.
Okay.
2003, 2014, and 2025.
Right.
And the math is about every 10 years. In other
Sure.
words, every time we go through this, we ask the same question.
Right.
And as I said at the beginning, in part, these are not 2 state laws fighting each other. One
Right.
is governance.
Right.
And one is law governing a business.
Correct. The distinction is
So-
when the assertion is made that this conflicts with state law or is in conflict with state law is not quite the right framing as explained. If that quotation is correct, it's that it's not inconsistent with state law. The charter and language that they both can coexist. But we don't have I'm just quoting the town
Mhm.
attorney,
That-
quoting the Director of the Municipal Law Unit of the AGOs.
And it is that opinion which supports the position that the town charter members are
Right.
taking.
Yeah.
In terms of not changing things. And since they feel like adopting these changes would take away something from them, they're not willing to do that if the Attorney General's office says it's not inconsistent. So you can see where they're coming from, which is a point I really do want to make.
So I think we should frame the motion as pick which of those one you do want to read it as approve, disapprove, or abstain, and then read the motion with one of those words. I would suggest either approve or disapprove, and then we can vote on whichever of those formulations.
Well, I'd
Yeah.
like to read, so I'd like feedback in terms of which that is. It's not my choice.
Well, why don't you start with
I would like to hear your recommendation.
All right, my recommendation would be disapprove of the language in the charter. Because I think it sets us up for the false understanding that somehow we have gained power, which we do not. I think the charter language needs to change. I don't think it necessarily needs to change in all the ways that was presented. But we're not really given the opportunity to change it. I mean, in an all or nothing scenario, we
Right.
aren't allowed to optimize it. So I think there are some things like the audit, like not approving contracts, at the minimum, that I would like to see the charter retain. On the other hand, thinking that somehow we have power over the accountant or in-house counsel, I think that is misplaced. And I think there needs to be language which supports the commission and the CAB in getting a resource, getting somebody who could advise us on an issue that supports us, not limits the general manager. And I'm not sure the framing of that, but I don't think this language does that. And I don't think we're going to get an opportunity to do that. So
do you want to read your motion as with disapprove? Read your motion with that
let me just add one more thing. Why disapprove as opposed to the other? Approve would say, I buy into
no
that
change.
risk, and abstain doesn't really kind of get strong enough to the fact that that it's okay. So that's why.
Can I, you want him to read it or
Read
can
it.
you make a comment?
Why don't I read
Sure,
it and then we can.
sure. Why don't you read your motion? We'll second it and then we can have a last round of comments and then we've been on this for a long time. We have
I
rates.
knew it, well, I knew it was gonna take some
Megan.
time, which is why we had other issues
Yeah, yeah.
before. The Reading Town Charter Committee is likely to move to approve section 3.5 Municipal Light Board of Commissioners without changes to the current text. If this occurs, the Municipal Light Board of Commissioners directs its representative on the Town Charter Committee to disapprove from such a vote,
Just disapprove such a vote.
disapprove from such a vote.
I'll second that.
So what, any further discussion?
So my one concern was saying disapprove and taking a position of flatly not approving is based on this conversation that we just had and going through all these details. We don't have a final version of changes that we all agree we would like to see. If we had that, you know, the CAB input that we agree is appropriate and legal, if we have what you say we should keep, if we have what we say we should delete, and we all felt confident that, and we presented that forward to them, aligned, and they said no, then to me, I would disapprove. But we didn't do that. So,
Yeah.
you know, that process didn't happen. I'm not judging why or why not. Just, you know, it's clear they weren't gonna want to change it anyway, but my perspective would be either approve because we did not present an aligned set of changes, or abstain because we didn't essentially finish our piece of the process by giving them our approved.
I hear where you're coming from, and if, I think Phil will understand, if there was an interest in the other side for engaging in a discussion,
Mhm.
then maybe, you know, proposing some modified text would have been the way to go, but I was hoping to even have a discussion with them about even some minor changes, and Phil knows even the
Right.
some small changes were going to be accepted. So, you know, it really is an up and down sort of thing.
I would like to just kind of seconding what Pam said, that all we've done is this up or down on John Coyle and the removal of board powers and centering them in the general manager, citing chapter 164. When I think with a year of process, we could have looked at some of those, as you say, Ray. We could have looked at some CAB stuff, and maybe there would have been some other things other than these two things. Like, how do we interact with, you know, like Greg does a lot of good stuff with the towns. Does he have a formal role in helping towns with buildings? There could have been other ways we could have taken it. We could have mentioned the climate law. What are we going to do under that? So, but like Pam said, we never did that. And so, and to only say up or down on this, I think is the wrong framing. Like, we should have had a process. We probably could have come up with some things we could have agreed on, but we didn't. And because we didn't, I have to say that I can only say, no, I don't disapprove because we didn't put something forward. That doesn't mean you're not right about.
Would you prefer a different verb?
No, you can put the verb in. You've made the motion and it's been seconded. So now, but and out of no disrespect to either you or Phil, I will vote against it because I would have wanted to have the process. And I think we would have probably had pieces of this, pieces of CAB and pieces of other things that might have gone in.
If you were going to vote against the word disapprove, would you vote for the word abstain?
Well, we already have a motion on the floor, right? So we have to.
Well, the motion, there can be an amendment to the motion.
I mean, sure.
You asked me to pick a word, I picked a word, and now you're objecting.
Oh, I'm
to the
sorry.
word.
You're right. It's fine.
If
Do you want to reword it as abstain? And
I would rather present the view of the board than not. And
Sure.
if the board wants to abstain, that we did not invite us into engage in a process.
I don't think
Of
that's
debate.
quite true.
Well,
I
It
think
did not happen.
we could have as a board done something. Right?
I don't know.
Right.
I don't know if that's true.
I
I guess
vote,
what I hear is that regardless of whether we did it or not, I agree, we could have done it, but would they have even listened?
No,
I-
they would not listen.
Yeah.
that is,
They
I
would
don't,
not let
I don't think that's true because they were asking, what does your board want us to do? Is what the members were saying at the last meeting. What is your board suggesting? And we didn't have an answer for that. Because the board never had a process that voted on anything. So,
I respectfully disagree with that, Mr. Chair.
When did our board,
All right, that's not the question.
Presentation.
We're deviating from the motion.
We're getting away from it.
And given we're one member short, I would rather have a 4-0 vote than a 3-1.
okay,
So I revised the motion as follows. The Reading Town Charter Committee is likely to move to approve the section 3.5 Municipal Light Board of Commissioners without changes to the current text. If this occurs, the Municipal Light Board of Commissioners directs its representative on the Town Charter Committee to abstain from such a vote.
Yeah, I will accept that as part of the
okay.
second.
I will also accept that, and I think I also, any discussion, I think I probably will, I will vote for that. But it seems
All
like,
right. We have a second?
Yeah, I accept it as part of the second.
Okay,
As, so it's now part of the main motion.
that's fine.
all right. Then we,
All-
further discussion?
No. All in favor? Okay.
Aye.
Motion carries 4-0. Thank you very much, Ray. That was a great summary. Okay, now the real action of the night. Sorry, Megan, for could have had dinner or a nap or something.
No, it's a fascinating discussion.
I wouldn't go that far.
Hopefully this discussion is go a little faster. So we put a lot of stuff in the slides. I'm not gonna go over every single line, but just wanna kind of walk through.
All right, let's take a second. Actually, it's
How much of that stuff is? You can do it down.
Okay.
Mostly. Yeah, like I'm looking, it's just
All right.
recently.
So, the board approved our 2025 budget last fall. And then based on that, we do have to change the rates for 2025. That's what we're doing now. And before we explain what we're proposing here, I want to reemphasize that we are in the process of doing a cost of service study for the sort of the as the foundation for our base distribution rate design. And so next year when we meet about 2026 rates, we'll be presenting something pretty probably different. But for 2025 rate changes, we are using the same kind of methodology that we've been using, I think, since 2018 and 2019. So so maybe most of you already know how that is done, so I'm not going to go into a whole lot of details. And this slide is really just talking about two main things. The first two sections are really just the policy and the goal context of setting rates. One is our own mission. So we have to balance the three components of our mission with reliability, low cost, and the obligation to meet the non-carbon target. Yes.
So Megan, you said that the budget was set in late fall.
Yeah.
Right, and this is the procedure we have, right? I mean, normally in a business, you set your revenue goals, you know your expenses, and you set your revenue goals based on rates or whatever parameters you have. Rates here determine our revenues, right?
Sure.
So we set the budget in fall, or late fall, and we are adjusting the rates 6 months ahead later. So my question is that, you know, we made a budget, it had revenue projections. And so the rates that you're going to present, I'm just telegraphing the question up front so that, you know, at the end of the day, you want to make sure you have enough revenue to cover costs, right? I mean, that's
Yeah,
what we want to make sure.
That's pretty much, yeah.
So how different are the rates from what was considered at the time that the budgets were made?
Yep.
And what are the implications of such rates on the revenue plan? And, you know, I'm sure you've dealt with it, but, you know, if this requires any changes in expenses, you know, and operations. So I just want to frame it in terms of looking at it as a revenue issue and making sure there's enough money in the operations. That's all. So I'm sure you'll answer it, but I wanted to frame it that way.
Yeah, thank
Because
you.
the-
Your you can make the presentation. Yes, the budget that you approved is basically the revenue requirement. That's the foundation for our rates that we're proposing here.
So are the numbers much different from what was?
No, not a whole lot. We literally looked at this together this afternoon.
Okay.
Just to make sure, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Just remind me what we approved last
In November.
in November. It
Yes.
was what percentage change?
Well, percentage is a relative term, right? But if we're talking, so if we wanna get to that first.
Once you,
Do we wanna
what-
get,
I think the key,
I mean, I understand all the other slides, like the fronts of, we've been through the other content, so I'm just trying to like, get to the punchline.
yes, so for the budget that you approved for the base part, the budget was 45.3 million.
yeah, so
So
to answer your question, budget to budget was 5.4%.
Okay. And
And
what are
And
we
then
discussing
what we're
here?
proposing to collect for the base is 44.6. So it's very close.
she's asking percentages.
Yes.
So it's 5.4 and 5.4.
Okay.
In terms of base. Now, the total is, so, power supply is variable, because this will come out in the discussion she brings.
Mhm.
Power supply is adjusted every month.
Yeah.
So the total average is 6.3%, but that includes a piece. But the key thing that Vivek's asking about is revenue, which is the base budget,
Mhm.
which as Megan just mentioned, is roughly about $45 million. That's consistent. It's within several $100,000 between what we proposed and what we budgeted and what we proposed.
Yeah, that's more of a fixed cost than the power supply, because power supply changes every day.
Right.
Yeah.
So
That's the-
basically they match. Yeah.
So, okay, so does that mean I don't need to talk about this slide anymore?
Well, no, just, you should hit,
I just, okay.
Yeah, I think we're good.
you should just,
All right, yeah. So the other piece of the policy context, the second one is, there's changes at the federal level, but at the state level, at least for this year, the climate target is not changing. So that's also the big context for that for us. That's the third and the fourth, sections are really about, like, you know, the third one is really about the power supply cost and the budget and the rates that we collect. It has been volatile and it will continue to be volatile. So we did build cushions and we have contingencies around it. So we're in a good spot in terms of, you know, collecting the revenue for that piece. And also we make adjustment every single month. So that's how we are kind of addressing this kind of volatility of that piece. And the last part is, you know, all these major investments are the main driver for our base distribution rate increases because of these investments. Next. Okay. Oh, the next one. Next one, you've seen this, showing up. Okay, yeah. You've seen this many times. So this is like specifically how we set rates, and then what you can see on the chart, you know, the four items in that little box, those are all power supply cost, budget, and rates. And the operating costs and the other like contribution we make to the towns, they are part of the base rates. I'm gonna move on to the next one. This is just like the sort of the conclusion of all the rates that we changed. And then, you know, I'll go to the chart first. Just in general, I think you already know this, most MLP's prices rates are lower than the three big companies in the state. And it's the same for Reading municipal line.
The question on this,
Yeah.
on the chart on the right-hand side, is
Yeah.
that from
You're-
January? Is that an annual average? Where's that data from?
That's the current the rates so for Reading, the RMLD, that's our proposed rate.
Okay,
And then for those three companies, those are their current rates.
and
Yeah.
they tend to change every 6 months.
Megan, these guys are lower.
Pardon me?
Theirs is lower.
Yeah, you are.
Oh, we're not saying we're lower than you.
But our capital budget's like, this year is like 12 million up. So 40 million for capital improvements. That 40 million is capital improvements, right?
What else do I want to say here? Yeah, that's pretty much it. Like, you know, the monthly increase, we already talked about that. And now I'll look at the next one. I think maybe residential rate is people care about that more and people react to that more. So here's the sort of the breakdown of the different items on the bill. And then the first three, so that these are colored kind of boxes. The first three are related to the, distribution, the base part of the rates. And then the next three colored are the power supply rates. And then the last one is the discount for early payment. So I don't know if you have any question. I'm sure you've seen this a lot. So if you look at the kind of notes on the right side where we say base cost, where the proposed rates are about 5.5%. So that's likely to happen if there's no major change to the actual kilowatt hour sales against our forecast. Right now we're forecasting 650,000 megawatt hours. So that's gonna be at that level if no major changes. And then for the power supply side, even though the percentage is higher, but like I said, it's gonna be adjusted every single month. And it can go up and down. And last year I think actually was lower.
It was lower.
Yeah.
So what
Was
we,
weather-
what we did,
It
yeah,
was the
remember,
mild,
it was more mild,
Yeah.
yeah, particularly in the fall.
and this year was particularly cold.
Yeah, the first 2 months have been cold. We don't know about the summer yet, so.
Weather dependent.
So, sorry,
Yeah.
I'm asking a question. I see on the chart, right, that we're predicting a fuel cost, right, increase of 3.9%, right? And that's based on what projection, especially on, I think potentially fuel costs could go down, over the next course of the next year, so where is the fuel increase coming from?
So,
You-
yeah, it's the full price curve.
Yeah, or you.
Yeah, Bob, that's basically the current projections. So we took a snapshot as of 2 weeks ago of forward price curve. Forward price curve is up significantly for the year 2025. I think your suggestion, which we are hopeful for, is that after we get through this cold snap, the forward price curve will drop down. But that basically is the mid-February forward price curve that's driving those numbers. And as Megan mentioned, we adjust these each month because they are intended to be pass through. Again, RMLD does not mark up fuel, transmission, or capacity.
And also
Correct.
consideration is just like we don't know the exact kilowatt hour sales. So that's almost like the cushion we built. And another element to it, you all know, I think we briefed you that the transmission costs increased 20% this year. We did not increase 20% of the PPCT charge. So it's a little bit of a kind of allocation of that cost increase. All right, I'm gonna move to the next one.
Yep.
This is just another sort of a summary of all these major rate classes and what the current, what's the proposed kind of a bill impact based on sort of the average or median usage of kilowatt hours, the percentage change. I don't know if you have any questions, but it's pretty, yeah.
The only thing is, I checked with Greg also, was in terms of time of use.
Yeah.
So it's usually helpful to know what the peak and off-peak rates would be.
Yeah.
So you've got for residential and for industrial. If you could just somehow indicate, what is the off-peak and what is the peak rate? Because here you used an average number, right? So
Yeah. It was actually kept, so it's not an average, but it was basically
the
weighted, it was the weighted average.
weighted average, right?
In those examples. So I didn't actually pull up
Right.
my website. So we have it on there. It's
But you're right, on the website.
yeah. So the website
The
has
website
every
it
month.
shows,
Yeah.
on the website it shows, and it shows going back a few months, right?
Yeah, well, actually, it
Yeah.
goes back in fact, if you want, it goes back many years on the website. But yeah, the current 6 months are on the website
For time of use, yeah.
for time of use for both industrial and
So no, I just want to know going forward.
Yeah.
In terms of the proposal, what would the difference be?
so we do a calculation between the two, and it's driven by a bunch of, so we have not changed the percentage between the two in terms of we don't change the difference between the on-peak and the off-peak.
The
Basically,
ratio.
yeah, we just basically take what the actual costs are. And we basically run it through a spreadsheet, for lack of a better answer. I can pull up the,
So the ratio between on-peak and off-peak is not changing for this time, for this year's rate change. But then because we apply the total cost with the increase, right, percentage increase, so that kind of cascades into both the off-peak and the on-peak rate.
he's trying to get a sense of what the difference is, and I don't have.
But what I'm trying to do is
Uh-huh.
see if there is a signal here you can use to influence behavior. Okay, so I'm trying to see if you
There
can
is,
use,
it's
Yeah,
if
significant.
you can use the rate change communication process to also encourage time of use adoption.
So Vivek, I look at the data on here and I interpret it to show me the benefit of that by looking at the residential A versus the residential time of use, right?
Yeah, there's that piece.
That weighted average number, so.
Yep.
161 versus 139. If I do time of use, I'm gonna pay a weighted average of 139 versus if I don't, I'm gonna pay a 161. So that is like a 20%. I'm just doing
Yeah, it's
rough
right, it's not
math.
quite that, but somewhere between 10 and 20, yeah.
something like that in terms of it.
Yeah, no, but if I know the rates, like, so I was asking Dave, he said most of his stuff is off peak, right?
Well,
But
it's because that's what we do at our
yeah,
house.
right, yeah.
Right, maybe there's, but
It depends what you
point
do.
being like, on average, people are gonna save somewhere between 10 and 20% by going with time of use. And possibly then more if you're being more proactive about that, right?
So Pam brings up the very key piece, which is before you get into the difference, there's a clear benefit of being time of use. And then just to answer your question, so in February, the off-peak fuel charge was 4.4 cents and the
10.
on-peak fuel charge was 11 or 10.8 cents.
Yeah.
So it's a significant difference.
So it's a
between-
significant difference. So it's
Yeah.
worth
That's the
communicating.
ratio you're talking
So
about, right?
so there's value in communicating.
That ratio carries over to the 2025 rates.
It is.
So-
Yeah, that's what, again, I think that's what you're saying, right?
So yes, answer to your question. So the one thing that we've talked about many times is we have set up the rates for time of use. We encourage it, but we're not massively promoting it because it requires different meter capability, which we have not yet installed. And so part of
Why our
the,
capital number is high because we're doing the AMI.
and we're doing the AMI replacement program. So when we get, so a year and a half from now, when we're near the final phase of getting everything to have time of use enabled meters, we're gonna push aggressively on TOU.
But on that note, we are concluding the MDM project tomorrow. Yes. And then we're gonna have hourly data and we're gonna do shadow building, which means we're gonna inform, like you said, educational opportunity. We're gonna inform the customers, if you are on TOU, this is what
Oh,
you
that's
will
great.
have to pay.
See, Pam, if you look at the numbers, like 16 versus 18.68, it's not such a big difference, but 4 to 10 cents, that's a big difference.
Mhm.
Okay,
That this is a summary. So this is the weighted average, just to show the bill impact. But for you, if you wanna know what's the ratio, that rate table on the website is the most up to date. And like I said, the ratio is about three
Yeah.
versus
right.
1.
Yeah.
It's the same for the 2025.
yeah, so it's a more powerful, if you can, if you actually communicate that, but
Yeah,
it's a
two
question.
steps. It's beyond time of use and maybe you don't even have to change a thing and you're still gonna get a benefit,
Could-
right?
could
Yep.
definitely,
One.
Or take even more proactive and, be like Dave and do your laundry at midnight or whatever you're doing. And
It's after 7, it's after 7, it's after 7.
Yeah, so yeah. Right. Yeah, and I think that would be the thing to present to customers, like, hey, you're doing this if you change this much and use TOU, but not just tell them, hey, you could save money with
Yeah,
TOU.
we're
from
trying to
what
make
you've
a
already
behavior
done.
change. Back to- You're
Right.
you're both
Yeah.
trying to make a change, exactly right.
yes.
Yeah, one
Literally.
thing to remember though about time of use is when you get home and you're a typical 8 to 5 and you come home, you turn your lights on, right? We want to promote it, but at the same time, it's a penalty for folks who live that 8 to 5 lifestyle, right? We always need to be aware of that. And, if you can take advantage of time of use, that's great, but many people are not able to take advantage of that because of their lifestyle. And the one thing that I'm always afraid of is it's a penalty, right? And we need to consider that how many people live and come home in our home and need to use their appliances and turn things on at 5 o'clock, right? You can opt into it, but we always need to be aware of that as one of our rates. It should always be something that is ever present in our mind.
Yeah, so Bob, that's a great point. That's why I think we want to do like a whole year of education, do the shadow billing. And then when we do have the AMI meters, have the entire new TOU rate design, it's an opt-out. If it doesn't fit their lifestyle, then they can opt out of this rate and just have the regular rate.
And as Bob said, it's probably my RMLD coal miner's hat from 5 to 7. I'll wear that. I don't need to turn the lights on until at least 7 o'clock. I can
Bologna sandwiches until 7 o'clock, and then you can have your hot meal.
So can I let me just make sure I'm really clear in terms of the rates that we're saying we're going to vote for today are no different than the ones we voted in November. Is that?
No, we didn't.
Is that higher?
We didn't vote for it.
Oh, we didn't vote for them, but the estimate was 6%.
Sorry, we set the budget
Yeah.
at a certain
6%
expectation.
was because I'd set my budget for the town.
Yeah.
Based on a 6% increase, which is now a 6.7% increase.
Okay.
And I've already presented to the finance committee. So that 0.7 I don't have in my budget.
Okay, so it is not the exact same.
No.
Okay.
Well, yeah. And what you're really voting on is the base rates. So the rate sheet. So you're not voting on power supply.
So I got that.
Okay.
But I just want to make sure the difference between what we voted for before, which thank you for correcting me, was the budget at a certain rate expectation.
Yep.
The rate that we're now voting for are slightly different, but not significantly different than.
Totally not. It's
Okay.
about the same.
Thank you.
Yep.
They don't have that.
Oh, these are the.
One point that I'm sorry for keep interrupting. It's hard to jump in, but the main fact, our revenue went up, correct?
Yes.
Revenue went up. Now we're increasing rates, right, by 6%. And we talked about a rate increase before, and I think my gut feel on this is, we're making more money, yet we're increasing prices. We have some anticipated cost increases, but does that translate to 6%? Every year we go, 5%, 6%, 5%, 6%. That's significant over time, right?
Yeah.
That's one thing. Does it have to be a 6% increase? The last time we went up, we overestimated. We scaled it back. I'm a big believer that we should go up in incremental. If we need more, increase more, but don't increase for the sake of increasing. It's one thing we need to be always cognizant of. We have low rates. Let's keep them low. It makes it attractive.
Is there any wiggle room, or Bob, do you have a suggestion of I'm just, where does that, where,
It ties to the budget. So Bob,
Yeah,
Bob, we haven't been doing 5 or 6% for the past several years, and we can give you that history, but we're like, what we're trying to give you here, instead of doing budget to budget, because if we were going to do the budget to budget, we would have been roughly 3.3%, which is what we
that's
were.
right. Yep.
And I'm not saying 3% is not anything, but what we decided to do this year is again, what the customers care about is what the actual bill is each month. That's what they pay with. They don't pay with percentages, they pay with dollars. And
Correct.
your point's well taken. Last year we had forecasted roughly almost $155 an average bill. It ended up working out to be $152 an average bill for a whole bunch of reasons. But the primary reason, and as Megan mentioned, it's tied to the actual, our actual cost times the actual kilowatt hours we sold, which you'll see in a few minutes is tied to weather. And it's also tied to power supply, which is the biggest variable. So now, so we would have done 155 to 161, and I can go back and run that calculation. But we're trying to really be transparent to the customers to say your average bill, and that's why I put the residential one back in place, is going to be roughly $10 a month higher this year than last year. That's what we forecast, but it could be less. $9.56.
So, that would be super helpful to see what our rate increases were over the last several years. And what's that percentage, right? And not the percentage number, you know, because bills are higher or lower, but what is that percentage from the last 3 years, right? And now, is there a ballpark of what they were?
Yeah, they're in the range. So of what the budget to budget was?
No, what was what would you say was our actual percentage of increase on your average bill last year? If it was 3%, you know, economically, or, you know, if we could handle that, let's do a 3%, a lower increase. You know, I think a 6% is a significant jump.
So
And,
Bob,
you know,
just to clarify, are you talking about rate increase percentage or bill increase percentage? I think they're quite different. It depends on how many kilowatt hours they use.
If you look at the last couple of years, we had shock therapy when I think one year we did 10% or 12%. And then we talked about rate stabilization. Bob brought it up and we came way down. So again, 2 months ago, 3 months ago, we were talking about 6%. Now we're at 6.7, 7%, call it whatever. And we're not talking about rate stabilization, so it's so close. But I agree with what Bob's saying is we were way off those other 2 years and then came drastically down from that 10%, 12. And we're really in
we're averaging about 5%. And again, the key driver of this, and Bob alluded to it earlier, it's what's really going to happen to the forward price curve of the open market. That's going to have a huge variable in terms of what this really works out to be.
Well,
Go ahead.
From like a couple years ago, I brought up, it's really what we really should be looking at comparing year on year. What we're really improving is the distribution charge, because that's what's covering, that's what's
Exactly
funding.
what we're talking about. Yeah.
We should, I mean, not to say ignore the power supply increases, but those are always pass-throughs and those always fluctuate up or down, and they either help or they hurt. What we really should be really comparing, so we have a very good understanding of what we're actually approving and what we're actually doing to the rates, is just looking at the distribution charge, because that does not change. That is locked in. That's not variable. So those top three columns is really what we should be focusing on year on year. If we want to see what we've done over the past few years, we ought to look at what we've been improving in that area and how much we're increasing the rates there, because the power supply the last 2 years helped us. And this year it could hurt us because of what's happened in January and February. So I think from a rate, and to get a good idea of what we're actually approving and what we've been approving over years, and what we're actually kind of contributing to the customer and what they're paying, is really those top three line items. Because the other stuff's passed through and
So
we have it's out of our control.
Good point. So what is that?
It's $4.72.
Or what's the percentage?
5.5%.
It's 5.5% of the distribution charge. Overall bill, it's like 3%. So you can look at it two ways. You can look at, we're increasing the rate that we control by 5.5%. But right now, based on what we think the power supply is going to do, it's about a 3% increase overall. But it's two numbers, or maybe we need to look at both.
But Jason, I think at the end of the day, the customer looks at the total bill, right?
Yeah, but
I do, but for us as the board and trying to understand what our impact is.
That's what we just mentioned to Pam.
If we want to understand what our impact is, we got to look at that, because that's our impact. That's
the control cost.
That's the control stuff. That's the stuff we actually control. We can actually see, we have visibility in, that we know it's actually gonna be there. That's what we need to really be focusing on. And the power supply, it's nice to have the visibility. It's nice to see and compare of what we think it might do. But in reality, we're really just approving the top three rows.
So so given what Bob said, and I think everybody's sensitive to, the cost increases, we're also coming off 2 very cold months where customers' bills were pretty high. At least if I look at my own, it was definitely shocking, because we, just used a heck of a lot more energy. But do we need the full amount of this 5.5% on the base cost, given the fact that in January and February, the volume was up significantly?
Yeah, we're proposing to change this rate April 1st. So there's,
So if we really
it was billed,
really want to be
will
technical,
come down really.
we lost a quarter.
Okay,
At the end of the day, the answer to your question is, no, this fits the budget.
Okay.
And Jason's right, and you can look at numbers every different way. We're trying to be as clear and transparent. The only thing that you're really voting on is customer charge and distribution energy. And your energy
In
efficiency.
which case we're not changing.
And we've left that.
This year, yeah, we were gonna update you on all the new programs that we're having. And if it comes to like, okay, there's a lot of uptake on the program, we might propose increasing the EEC charge, but
Yeah,
this year
but
we're not.
Not right now.
So Pam brings up a great point. And when you're talking about your electric bill being, $600 a month because you're all electric, or $700, a 6% increase is significant on that charge, right? So that's kind of I know we're using an average bill to look at it, but if you are electrified, it's a more intense increase, right? And you're gonna see it. It's gonna be $40 range. You're like, wow, jumped up $40. So
on the flip side, because we're talking about April, which is generally a low period, it should still be significantly better than our January, February bills, right?
Your
yeah,
bill
no, correct.
would be less than the ones you've been paying. Include even adding the rate increase into it. And we look at those. I mean, look at all of those elements in terms of our intention is to dampen the radical up and down that power supply would do by we have a fuel reserve that we make adjustments, small adjustments each month, but we try and dampen that.
I would say year on year, April 2024 versus April 2025, excluding power supply, you just paid $4.72 more this April compared to last April.
Thank you, Jason. That's exactly what we're trying to get across. It's $5 on a $155 bill. We talk about percentages, but it's $5.
So then why are we going up to 6.7 instead of 5.5?
6.7. Where are you?
Like I'm looking at the rates, like the municipality was 6.7% increase, right? And again, because I had a large budget we just added 2 all electric buildings in town, another 1 million kilowatts. So why wouldn't it be a 5.5% increase?
Are you in the school or the
I
municipal?
think
Rate?
Jade, we're.
Maybe I'm on the wrong page. Hold on, let me see. Come back. Where do you see it?
Oh, sorry.
Commercial?
Whatever.
Municipal C, 6.7% increase.
That's including the power supply, right? But there's not a breakout in the slides. There
This
should be.
includes,
Oh, no.
well, yeah, if you want, we can, so in the back, we can go and look at each one of those. We looked at each one of these different categories and back to what Megan was mentioning, and back to the request that is part of the goals for the team in 2025 is to look very carefully across all these different things, which we do anyways.
Yeah.
And so we looked at the cost, we took a whole bunch of considerations into how we allocated the various costs and how we move the various costs between those key rate classes. You'll see that industrial TOU went up the highest, right? And that was intentional, right? But you also look at the industrial TOU rate, which is 13.71 cents, which is an incredibly competitive rate. And we keep trying to fine tune the adjustments in terms of where we're putting our capital costs. At the end of the day, we can walk you through. I mean, there's some pretty deep spreadsheets that go through to generate these summary numbers. The municipal is basically a commercial rate. That's the way it's set up. And the only difference is that it doesn't have taxes tied to it. So there's no sales tax tied to it. We tried to the best of our ability to dampen the increases where we thought it was appropriate given the cost structure. Again, back to the earlier slide, these rates are meant to tie to the cost to serve those classes of customers.
Yeah, but if you look you look at 3 months ago, so you look at residential A, we talked about 6% increase. It was 6.3, so bring it down to 6, 6.2, bring it down to 6, 7.0 for the commercial, the 7 in the industrial, 7.9. But then you look at the other 2 rates, you could be at 6. So, 2 months ago, we felt that the number was 6%. And 2 months later, or 3 months later, wherever it's been, we're now over the 6%, which isn't a lot of money, a lot of difference to change. So why couldn't we look at it and find a way to get to 6%?
So what would be the change if we instead of 6.7, the board said, make that 6. That's the effect.
I'm just saying, even like the residential,
Have
like,
to allocate that to the other rate classes then,
You're moving,
because we're,
what we are responsible to do is, to the best of our ability, allocate the cost across the rate categories. So in terms of us saying we want to favor one class over another, is not consistent with our responsibility.
but what Bob said earlier was revenues are up, yet we're increasing. So if revenues are up,
Revenues are up because the cost, right? Because you're
Yeah,
passing.
but that's what I'm saying. So if you may not make as much, but the rate pay doesn't pay more. Like, I guess, isn't there a balance there where,
There is a balance there. That's a great question, Dennis. And that's why at the very beginning, we indicated, and Jason mentioned it as well. Our budget in 2025 is intended to have no debt, and we have no debt. And so we are incurring now costs, and we've been saving up for costs, but we have to also make sure. And so this is driven primarily by cash. It does impact the income statement, but as Vivek knows intimately well, this is a cash business. And so we have significant multi-million dollars worth of investments that we will be writing checks for this year, for the AMI system, for the AMI replacement system, for the substation, for land, and for the initial phases of the solar PV projects. So while we have some buffer, in our, we're basically from the budget, our intention is to be in 2025. Our net income is going to be, rate of return is going to be about 6%. We can go up to 8%. We're not there, but we can, but that's where we targeted. So we want to be careful that we don't end up in a situation where we don't have enough cash to cover all these. And that's how we look. There's a lot of stuff that goes in behind the scenes to bring this to, hey, there's 8 numbers that you guys are voting on.
yeah,
10
and
numbers you're voting
the 8% though, I've always questioned, because all I do is, and it's in every business, all I do is increase my overhead and I can make 8% more. If I reduce my overhead, my expenses are less. So like you said, you can make up to 8%. So if I hire more people, if my overhead's more, then I can make 8% of that, right? So all that can keep going up based on your expenses.
You can run the business all sorts of ways.
Yeah.
And the way we run this business,
It's 8%, but it's still.
Plant, not like you can't add people and increase your 8%. You have to increase your capital assets
You
in the
gotta
field.
increase your assets,
Okay.
yeah.
again, this is not a, back to Ray's point
cash,
earlier,
so you need
we
the cash.
run this as a commercial business, but we run it as a commercial business with a lot of, and we're not highly regulated, but there are a lot of constraints in terms of what we can and can't do. Our real focus in terms of running the business is to make sure we keep as much downward pressure on the rates, but more specifically, the monthly bills, all the different rate classes pay, but to make sure that we make the proper investments. And as we've talked about over a while, we are basically, we have specific projects that we're working through. And we're also, back to what Megan put in there, it was a small point, but it was a big point, which is right now we are still preparing for electrification with a doubling of load by 2050. And so we're slowly, we can't just, intimately well, and everybody knows this, you can't just say, hey, look, we're going to build a new substation in 1 year. There's preparation and all of these things. So to answer your question, we designed and we made all the rate adjustments to properly allocate the cost that we anticipate making or incurring. And that goes back to the budget, right? And the budget, the reality is, the key number, back to your question, is roughly $45 million, right? The whole revenue is about $120 million, but that 27% roughly that Megan had in that chart indicates that's the base revenue. Everything else floats based on load, kilowatt hour sales, and actual cost incurred.
and I just want to add one thing. When you talk about municipal, school, and industrial, all these 3 rate classes have demand charges. Why? Because so they have higher power demand. That's actually what's driving the capital investment. So I would say, I don't want to make a statement right now because we haven't finished doing cost of service study. But if we do that, so right now, just look between all these rate classes. I think those 3 are actually, for whatever reason, historic low, the rates have been too low. I don't want to make it sound like I'm kind of making that statement, but I will present like the final cost of service study to kind of prove what's actually causing which part of the cost. But just looking at all these rate classes, that's what we've been seeing. Because when we look at our rates, so MWIC does the rate comparison for all the MRPs and the IOUs. Our commercial and industrial rates are way lower than a lot of the other utilities. So I'm not saying we want to just increase rates for these rate classes, but
Yeah, and again, I'll be adding 2 electric, we just went live with one, with the other one in September. All electric buildings, 1,000,000 kilowatts, and my demand charge,
yes.
my
you
demand
got
charge is gonna be
manage
huge.
your demand.
Because everybody's gonna
Yeah.
walk in at the same time every morning, turn every
We-
switch on and every
We
computer.
need to talk about peak demand and management.
So when you look at that, this could really affect me even more than the 6% because my demand charge is gonna be higher because everyone starts at the same time every morning. Everybody goes home at the same time every night, but my demand charge is gonna be boom, every light on in the building at 7
Yeah,
AM.
we give Dennis $1 million for a battery.
I'm gonna put a battery backup.
I mean, really,
behind the scenes.
we have programs for this, right? So,
No. But, it's just, every community is gonna start doing this.
Yeah.
We're talking about building a school and you guys are talking about building a school. It's gonna be all electric. Those demand charges, everyone walks in the school, everything comes on because all the people are coming in.
Yeah.
That's really gonna be an effect on people's numbers.
So that's the exact context of what we've been discussing for a while in terms of revising our shred the peak program. Because the current program is not very effective in terms of changing load on the residential basis. And most of the commercial industrial buildings, they have no interest. Now, in your case, you will. So one of the things that we do want to do is figure out, and this is part of the reason why we've moved to the MDM system. So, and Megan's mentioned the shadow billing stuff. We're trying to, and the AMI replacement.
there he is.
Hey, here he is.
We want to make a program that allows us to, at the end of the day, help you guys be as efficient as you possibly can. But we're still in the early stages of that.
Yeah, when you look at Shave the Peak and everything, schools now they're not 7 to 3:30 anymore. They're 6 in the morning for CARES programs till 10 at night. And they're running 7 days a week and all summer.
Yeah.
The days of schools being an 8-hour day
Long gone.
are long gone. So when we talk about the like special needs programs, I can't just drop the temperatures down. And when you look at 14 air handlers on a high school, I can't shut down parts of the building because of how it's split up and run. So that means engineering has to change in the future to allow me to say, I'm going to shut off the top 2 floors completely if the programs don't run there. So it's not as easy to say shed the peak in the municipality world because
You
live it.
don't have a lot of leverage. And so that's part of it. So the other elements in terms of why we look at shred the peak, our focus has been, and the batteries are a good example. That transmission cost, so as Megan mentioned, that transmission cost, the transmission rate is up 20% between 2024 and 2025. So back to the suggestion, how can we absorb part of that? We've tried to absorb part of that and not push all of that on. We're supposed to, but we try to absorb a little bit of that. But at the end of the day, the message is we are much more efficient in terms of managing our peaks with utility assets such as batteries and generators. And that's why we're making the investments in the 20 megawatts. We're going from 5 megawatts to 20 megawatts in the next 12 months is to create that leverage so that we can push it. Again, not single out any individual group, but take that entire transmission cost in the total budget, which this year is about $23 million, and trying to dampen that down and get it back down to sub 20s. That's what so at the end of the day, our real view is that we are going to be as aggressive as we possibly can and learn from as many people as we can in terms of how to prompt and encourage customer behavior. But our view is that currently is that the real leverage is utility assets to drive those peaks down during the peak hours. And we're actually and the batteries is a perfect example of that strategy. And that'll push everybody down. So when we sit here and present these rates, it's not like, hey, we don't really care. You guys know we're making investments to manage the overall cost structure. So I hope that helps.
No, I appreciate it. Like I said, it's just a matter of the reason we're all here is to keep an eye, or especially
all of
the rates for all of it, and you guys as well.
All of us.
I'm not taking that from anyone. But every year we start off at a high number, and Bob goes, what about the rate stabilization fund? How can we look at it? And we always come down. And this year we're coming in, and we're not coming down, and we're going live with it in 4 weeks. That's my only.
Well, yeah, but just in fairness, right? If we do what we did last year, we basically said last year was a 3.5, I think 3.3% change. And if we were to compare budget to budget, and back to Jason's point, we'd be at the same number. All right. Now, I'm not saying 3% is nothing, but you guys understand, we are, our cost structure, labor being a key piece of it, right? There's a natural increase. So I think we're doing a good, our focus is to try and make all of our actions, not just our customers more efficient, but us more efficient. But the other element is the real leverage. So that's the operating cost, which is the nut that we're talking about. The real leverage, however, is to be as aggressive as we can in terms of the power supply. And we have, again, weather has been in our favor, right? But also the things that we've been doing over the past few years have put us in favorable light to keep the downward pressure on our power supply costs, which is the key driver. And again, all I'm saying is there's multiple things that we do on an ongoing basis. The message that you guys are communicating to the leadership team is, we need to be as aggressive as we can in terms of keeping the upward pressure on our costs down. And since we are a not-for-profit, that means we keep downward pressure on rates. There is only upward pressure on rates, but to dampen that, the magnitude of that upward pressure. Make sense?
Yeah. Are we ready for a vote, or is there
Yes, sir.
any requests for changes or
Oh.
deferrals on this, or?
Oh, there's only one, I'm sorry. There is one small change. When you guys get to it, put in a motion, but I put in the email last night, but thank you, Vivek, the renewable choice rider. So we did some cleanup on the renewable choice rider. It doesn't affect any dollar value. It's just technical cleanup, but we need your approval on that as well as these other core rates, so that we can properly submit those to the MPPU.
So,
The first
so
one.
the motion would have.
Before, yeah, is there more? Yeah.
Like, I always go back to revenue, and we're allowed to make X amount of profit based on our.
Based on capital assets.
Capital assets, correct. We're at 6% right now of that's what you said earlier, so we're at 6%. Now, if we stay at 6%, right, that's good. I mean, our mission, right, our mission is rates, right? That's one of them.
Our mission is reliability.
Yeah.
Right, in that order, reliable, low cost, non-carbon, in that order.
Yeah, so in that, if we stay at 6%, right? And we can maintain that 6% target and maintain it, not grow it, but maintain it. And, as we're doing two massive projects right now. Substation, we're doing AMI.
And land and solar.
Again, they're in the budget.
Yeah.
But they haven't, those are things we budgeted.
Yep.
We have cash.
But you're right, AMI and substation, those are
our two big ones right now.
Yeah.
That we paid for. They're paid for the project.
well, we're committed to, we haven't written the checks for all of it yet.
Well, but we have money in the bank to process those checks, right? It's
$38 million. No, we don't have all the cash in the bank. So we have $28 million of unrestricted cash.
Yes.
And we will spend probably $30 million this year on those two projects. Cash.
Yeah. So then it comes back to us to decide, at a certain point, if we're gonna need to bond or to get that revenue, but for those things that we incur, costs, debt costs, right? So I think there's multiple things going on.
Yeah.
But, our budget previously, it said, we're capable of doing this. My fear always is that, and again, when we go up 6.2% or 7%, and I appreciate you gotta do that study because it's gonna tell us a lot, right? Who are the right customers to be charging more to? Because we right now, we just don't know.
Father, we don't know, but we need to get better.
Get better. Correct.
We update it.
Yeah, updated, right? So who should be paying the proper share more based on what we're doing? But we come in and I get 10, and we come down. We live with something. We know it was 3 last year. Can we live with? Like you're saying, it was 3.3%.
That was what I'm telling you is, if you want to look at back to Jason's point, the base load change versus the total bill, it was mid-3s last year. It's mid-3s this year.
Okay, so it 3s, right? Well, why
with these rates equate to mid-3s. That's what I'm trying to tell you. If you want it, you can run numbers any way you want. And what we're really trying to focus on is what, the customers, at the end of the day, they pay the bill with dollars. So what's the difference between this year and last year? And it's not just budget to budget, it's what they really paid last year versus what we expect. They expect to pay this year. So if you leave power supply where it is, they'll spend $5, $472, or they'll spend roughly $5 more a month, $472 versus last year each month. I mean, that's an apples to apples comparison.
Yep.
Right. And that $5 or $4.72 out of $161 bill is 3 point some odd percent. We can run the numbers real quick. So what I'm sharing with you is, we hear clearly the pressure and the desire, and we feel it too, right? We're actually, this budget is actually $600,000 lower than what we forecast. And back to Megan's comment, we made our best estimate in terms of what the actual load is going to be for the year. But if we assume the load estimate that we made for the year, we'll be at $44.6 million rather than the budget, which is $45.3 million. Now, we think that we will not spend all the money that we have in the budget, so we won't need all of that. And worst case, if it ends up being more extreme, we have reserves. So we do have the rate stabilization, and we will come to you because that number, our target is roughly 6 million. It's hovering around 7.4 million. That's because of interest that has been accrued to it. We don't put anything into it or take anything out of it on a annual or quarterly basis, and we can make a decision. Last time we did that, we took $1.6 million out of it, again, approved in 2021. We haven't made any changes. So we have the ability for cash if we wanted to trouble, but we're already pushed, back to Vivek's comment, can we put downward pressure on it? We have, but we're trying to be very prudent. You don't want to end up in a situation where you are short cash, because this is a cash business.
Are you driving it, wanting to ask for a haircut on these rates at this point?
That's where I was getting, right? But that's why I was.
Sure.
We're talking rates.
Yeah, no, and yeah, what.
No, and Bob, the trade-off always is like you could set it to zero, right? You could set everything to zero, and then you say, what am I going to give up? Right? I mean, that's so you always have that conversation.
That's the budget process, but okay, yeah.
But I mean, that that means we're taking light bulbs off, right?
Yeah, no. So I come back to, so from a question of process, if we set a budget,
Correct.
right? So if this meets that budget, it's okay. If it was overshooting the budget, it's something you think about. So you think you should be thinking about rates when you set the budget, right?
We do.
So because the budget talks about activities that you need to do, right? And staffing you need to build. So you're thinking of an organizational capability and goals you want to achieve. And so that was my question. So that's why I asked, what is the rate you need to meet that budget?
Right.
And if this is that, so if you are going to reduce the rate, you're going to reduce the scope of what you want RMLD to do.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think that's the way. So it just can't be a rate discussion and not a scope discussion. It has to both.
100%, 100%. But it just sometimes we always aim high, right? And what can we live with to make sure? And again, it always goes back to how much revenue we generate, right? And if we're generating more revenue, that means last year we were more efficient, or whatever those factors were. We take that and we say, well, that was beneficial. How do we translate that back into this rate increase that says, all right, instead of 6.3, is it 5? Is it, are these the right numbers for? And again, everything goes up. We all know that, right? Everything goes up, but how much it goes up is important, right?
Totally agree. And so we're basically looking at a mid-5. So if you want to just do base rate stuff, we're in the mid-5s. And I think there's a general consensus. What's the general consensus of the inflation rate here? 3.5%, 4%?
Probably.
Okay. I'm of the same.
I suspect it'll be higher than that, but that's all right. That's
Great.
my bias.
It even makes it more challenging. So, and we have some significant, so again, the financial, like we look at the financials every week, and not just, what power supply is, but what our cash position is, what the forecast is relative to kilowatt hour sales, et cetera. So these numbers are not just, hey, it feels good. No, but again, you guys are part of the audience, but if anybody's playing back at this session, I want the rest of the organization to know there's a significant amount of forecasting of cash flow, right? Because again, cash flow is the critical piece. That's how we pay every bill, right? And we are, by law, we have to pay all of our bills. So, and we are doing a great job in terms of managing cash. So back to that 4%, we also mentioned, as you pointed out, we have some significant cash outlays for 2 projects that we are already engaged on, and potentially 2 other projects, right? So for those 2, like I said before, right, we do a good job of managing our unrestricted cash and our restricted cash to allow us to make sure that we are not in a cash constrained position. If you guys remember from our auditors, the past 3 years, we have been recognized for managing, not just having a good audit, making sure things are done, but the comment has been our financials are strong. And in fact, our S&P is AA-, which is excellent for a municipal utility. Again, that's because of how we're managing our cash. So to answer your question, should that number be 5 instead of 5.4? I mean, can we take $100,000 or $200,000 off the budget? We took, so as I shared with you, we're very sensitive to this. So budget relative to what we think the revenue is going to be, if everything works out exactly as we planned, we will not spend all the way up to our budget. We don't do that. And that's, you see that every year, right? We're under budget. But, back to Vivek's point, we could have tried to push it to get that last $600,000 into the rate, which would have pushed it a couple tenths of a percent up. We chose not to do that. So we've already put downward pressure. The things you were asking us to do, we've already done. I think, so the message is clear, but, and we'd be happy to, when we do this the next time around, the time that I say the time, the analysis and the assumptions and the work we do to make all this stuff work out. We'd happy to walk you through, but we're not just picking numbers. And I know you're not saying that, but this is a well-managed budget. I mean, honestly, and our financials are well-managed, and there is upward pressure on costs, and we just talked about those. But our reliability is better than it's ever been, right? We are more compliant than we have ever been in terms of being ahead, and we can decide to ratchet that back. That's $1 million, $1.2 million right there in terms of ratcheting that back down if we so decide to do that, right? There's a bunch of levers that we can pull if we want to, but we don't need to pull them right now. The rates are on the, we're in the 70th percentile. We're not in the middle, right? On residential, and we're in the bottom quartile on commercial, the C&I space, as Megan mentioned. So as we look at that over and over again, we say, hey, there's some imbalance there. So but we have to go through the proper analysis to be able to, and we did that last time. We did it in 2021, but we need to come back and look at that again because the world's changing around us and our mix of business is changing as well. Anyways, all said and done, we are proud and confident of the analysis that we've done. If we go back and, we went through so many cycles of making adjustments, and when you first do the rate stuff, you make adjustments and then you make some more adjustments. And when you start making adjustments in terms of what you think everything should be, right, the numbers are still where they are. You've got, you're optimized as best you can be. And that's where we are.
Are we ready for a vote? Or, open to ideas to, like, if we want to have a week to think about it and call a quick meeting, or if you want to, please. I don't want to, I'm just saying.
You guys, and I'll say this just real quickly.
Yeah.
You could do that if you want, but every time you call a meeting, there's massive overhead.
It's fine. I'm only asking because there's a lot of questions and it's a lot to process on a 2-day or a 4-day board book. So if there aren't, then let's vote. Yeah, that's all I'm saying. You're good to vote.
You're good.
Okay. I think we discussed it all and a lot of good points every way, and people expressed their concerns, but
Sorry.
no,
I just wish we'd done more to fix the imbalance in the C&I. I don't know why we haven't been doing that over time. I didn't realize we were at the bottom.
Have been doing it over time.
Have we? Okay.
We're not jerking it up. We're doing it steadily over time.
Okay.
All right.
There is a little bit of that in there. Okay. Is there? Yeah. Okay.
You can see it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. About a half.
No, and Nick can also point out, as being on the board for a while now, that there was a cost of service study that PLM did. I can't remember how many years ago, 5, 6 years. Yeah, 5 years ago, whatever it was. And they found that the residential rate was being subsidized by the commercial.
Exactly
They
right.
went the other way. So I think you really need the cost of service study to tell you who's
Got it.
subsidizing who.
Okay. So
The other element of that,
You tried. That's why.
Yeah. Understood. And I remember I remember, now that you say that, I remember, yeah, because it's volume. Okay, who's gonna make the motion? I apologize.
Oh, wait,
Please.
wait. I'm so sorry. Could you pass this down? Because we have to get only one copy, right? Forgive me. This motion has the additional rate in it, which is that yellow one. So if you read that one, then share it. That would be good.
And you're done with that, pass that back.
Yeah, sorry, my apologies.
Okay, you didn't memorize it on the way back? Yeah.
Saving paper, this is a good thing.
We're good, right?
Yeah, please.
Sorry.
That's going to double sided.
That's right.
All right, I'll move that
We
the
got it.
Citizens Advisory Board recommend that the Board of Commissioners vote to accept the General Manager's recommendation to replace the following MDPU rates effective for billings on or after April 1st, 2025. Replace 294 Renewable Choice Rider with 322. Replace 309 Residential Schedule A with 317. Replace 310 Residential Time of Use Schedule A2 with 318. Replace 311 Commercial Schedule C with 319. Replace 312 Industrial Time of Use Schedule 1 with 320, and replace 313 School Schedule SCH with 321.
Second. Yes,
I'll second.
okay, all in favor?
Paper down.
I move the Board of Commissioners on the recommendation of the City Advisory Board, vote to accept the General Manager's recommendation to replace the following MDPU rates effective for billings on or after April 1st, 2025. Replace 294 Renewable Choice Rider with 322. Replace 309 Residential Schedule A with 317. Replace 310 Residential Time of Use Schedule A2 with 318. Replace 311 Commercial Schedule C with 319. Replace 312 Industrial Time of Use Schedule, I'm assuming that's an I, with 320. Replace 313 School Schedule SCH with 321. You send that down to Greg.
Thank you.
Seconded.
Okay, ready for a vote?
Yep.
Any more discussion? Hopefully not. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
And that's 5-0. Okay, thank
Thank
you very
you.
much, Greg, and thank you, Megan.
Team effort. Yeah, thank you, guys.
All right,
Made you work for that one.
So certificate retirement, I think it was decided that every single year this topic will be reviewed and decided. So last year was when the biggest change was made from like a kind of an annual 3% increase to a jump to 55%. And for this year, we look at our kind of a reserve of certificates and anticipated certificates generation. We recommend to keep that retirement rate at 55% for the reasons I put in the slide. And mainly just like the supply of certificates is a little bit constrained. There are no major additions in terms of clean energy contracts. And some of the hydro contracts we're cleaning up those, some of them are about to expire and we're likely not to renew just because of the economics of those contracts. And then when we change to 55%, we are already like we started with the lowest value certificates retirement, and then we sell the higher value certificates. With 55%, we're already eating into this next second tier of certificates. And then as you can see in the chart, once you pass, that 50 to 60%, the additional cost of certificate retirement will kind of increase significantly. So for these reasons, we still recommend 55% and likely, unless we get some really big new renewable contracts, probably for the next 2-3 years, we may not change this either. So that's the recommendation.
But the vote today is just for 2025 retirement rate.
Okay.
Ready for?
Yeah, fine.
I'll move that the RMLD Citizens Advisory Board, on the recommendation of the General Manager, vote to approve the 2025 annual certificate retirement rate of 55% of retail KWH sales.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
3.
I move the RMLD Board of Commissioners on the recommendation of the City Advisory Board and General Manager vote to approve 2025 annual certificate retirement rate, 55% of retail KWH sales.
Second.
Any discussion? No? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Yep. Move that a 5-0? Yes. Okay, great.
Thank you.
I mean, we want to grow that percentage, but this year I'm
Yeah.
on board with 55. You know.
Okay, policies.
Okay.
So there's in your table, and we'll put it up on the screen, but there's a policy table. Today's discussion is not to go through any individual policies, but basically to lay out what our plan is. And as you guys know, we have we have 32 policies, which is a lot. Every one of them was put in at a particular point in time for some particular reason. As you guys know, things don't just appear out of nowhere. Somebody did them for a reason, but sometimes those reasons disappear. So just take a look at your screen while Erica works on the technical issue. We basically looked at all of them. Our normal course of business is to review each policy every 3 years. And you guys remember that we've been in kind of a habit of trying to do at least 1 or 2. Ideally, we're doing 3 or 4. But anyways, in that chart you have in front of you, there's 2 colors. The blue, I think in your screen there's yellow across the top, and then the bottom is orange on the bottom. We went through those basically, and the top roughly 12 are ones that we would keep. Some of them we have recently updated, but we basically are in the mode of keeping that group. Tobacco, sustainable energy, public comment policy, community relations. You can read the list with me. Drug-free workplace, RMLD procurement, which goes back to some of the discussions you mentioned right before, with policies that you guys set for us to follow as a management team. We talked about the board document policy, code of conduct. Code of conduct is one that we made a run at about 2.5 years ago. We called it Serving with Excellence. Your feedback on that particular one was it needs to have some teeth. It's very aspirational. We will go back and make some revisions to that, but we do believe that a code of conduct should be a policy, and that's why it's in this top category. The Board of Commissioners, 19, that's when we reviewed with you and we updated back in May of last year. Drug and alcohol, Citizens Advisory Board is C2. Again, these are ones that we would create, keep and create, and then there's a one which is the release of the executive session minutes as well. But those are the ones that we would like to keep and continue to review on a regular basis. The second half, which are safety committee, paid sick leave, the rest of them, there's roughly half of them. Those are ones that while we say we would want to remove them, we would want to turn them into a procedure as opposed to into a policy. And then we'd have to do some content update as well. You can see in that one, there's facility use, anonymous communication, vehicle use. These are all policies, dress codes. There's a lot of pieces in there. We will, of course, as we do each one of these, review them with you. So we won't make any changes until we get approval, because right now they're all policies. But that's the strategy and the direction we want to go to. And the key piece is, as we have already been doing, we've been trying to streamline them and have them be internally consistent. As you have fewer of them, it's easier to make them internally consistent. But that's the overall strategy of what we'd like to do going forward. So we're not really looking for approval. Any feedback's good. But our goal and intention, besides just cleaning up each one individually, but also there's a strategy in terms of how we would probably move some of them to procedures. And as you know already, in many of the ones that we reviewed recently, there have been elements of those policies that we've actually moved into procedures. Question?
So I noticed, it's good to have you. It's like, you have paid sick leave, the tuition reimbursement, you have paid medical leave. Those are basically things that we don't have any control over. Just to mostly they're
right,
state run.
Yep.
You know, they're I don't know how they even became a policy. They're probably at one point in time. So I think that, yeah, the trust fund, you know, I don't know if there is one. I don't know if there's something that we must do procedurally.
Well, we'll make sure we keep it before we make any changes. We take that into account.
But I do agree with moving those into certain other procedures that you have.
Yep.
You'd have to go to tuition reimbursement to a perk, right? That's provided to an employee. right? But, I don't know. Should be
Yeah.
a policy, right? Yeah, it should be a procedure. Right? Yeah, I mean, like, you look at number 27, the use of the RMLD information systems. That goes back to 1997, when each of us was given a laptop that belonged to the department.
Can I ask-
Part of the communication.
That's a good question though. So let's use of information systems as a good example. If someone violates a policy related to use of information systems, what's the difference between that and violating a procedure with use of information systems? If you talk about like disciplinary action or or resolution path, what's the difference between a policy and a procedure?
Start with that.
Well, I kind of feel like you probably looked at this and made the determination.
I'll start with the fact that we have them sign policies to say, I'm adhering to this when they walk in the door. So
Mhm.
that's key to grab onto with a policy rather than a procedure would be like, hey, I'm training, to teach you how to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And if you make a mistake, then okay, we have to retrain you or we have to work with you to get the procedure down. So I see that as different. But to speak to your point, when there's things like laws, we see this sometimes people rewrite the law and the contract, they rewrite the law and the policy. And I know we're always trying to bring it back to not have as much of that, to have it say refer to the law, because if the law changes, you don't want to have your policies in, your policies within CBAs or other things. Oh, sorry. Within CBAs or other things to have you try to catch up with that all the time. So we really try to move away from that. And also, oftentimes your contract can make, whatever the law offers better, but it doesn't take anything away from it. So it's always like starts with the basis of the law, and then it may enrich it, but it doesn't take it. So
Did you benchmark like other MLPs or in terms of what they are looking at as policies versus procedures? Like, I do feel like there's a few things in here that I would expect a policy, and I would expect if somebody is given a laptop that they would sign a policy with how to use that.
yeah,
I think my kids have to do that for school, right? They have to sign the thing when they get their iPad that they, will follow this policy.
You would still have a signature and a procedure still has teeth. You can be disciplined for.
Okay, I just heard that it didn't. I just heard that.
She
it was
wasn't
more of a
being
training.
definitive, but
I-
many of our procedures have teeth to them where there's disciplinary action tied to them.
Okay, so then Then
I
what's the
just think
difference then?
it's stronger because they're signing off on a policy. Like when you're walking in and saying, here's our sexual harassment policy, you've read it, you're signing that you've
Mhm.
read it, that you understand it all. And
Right.
that's one of the differences I see in a procedure. We don't have anyone sign off on procedures.
So I feel like there are a few things in here that, identity theft, vehicle use, information technology use. Those feel like important enough to the, to the organization that, and risky enough if they're not policies, that they should be policies. Other things like the strategic plan, surplus material, those seem like good procedures, but. okay.
We'll, as we look at each one, so I think what you're basically saying is just make sure the ones, some of these are operational related, some of these are, when you talk about policy, strategic direction related.
Mhm.
So as we go to each one, so we hear the feedback, and as we look at each one, we'll look at them more carefully. This is our initial cut. We actually reviewed this with council in terms of their recommendations as well. Council has experience with a lot of the other MLPs. So as we come to each one of these, but we want to give the first and foremost, as we've talked several times in the past, that there's several policies that we need to look at sooner rather than later. We haven't prioritized these quite yet.
Mhm.
We'll do that between now and the next meeting. But we want to give you, as we look at each one individually, our intention was, let's really do a more significant revamp in terms of how we're trying to structure these. And we want to give you an idea of what we're trying to do. So it was meant, you guys will ultimately have approval in terms of how we handle each one of these. We'll bring them forward to you and we'll give you logic behind them. And obviously, like we've done in the past, we'll spend time to make sure that they're as clean, as consistent as we could possibly make them. We're also trying to make them that they are appropriately categorized between policy, procedure, and some of them, back to Bob's point, are legal, or potentially other ones are really overlapping into CBA contracts.
So it's a great, yeah, sorry, one thing I think you're a little concerned about is strategy should be a policy. It's, it should be something that the commissioner and the CAB will have some influence on.
You do.
So I think like in terms of any board, the most important thing the board does is strategy.
And I think, so
It becomes a very fundamental role that, the board plays.
yeah, and so I think the element is so complete agreement, right? The question is, what mechanism is best to do that? And the mechanism that we're using currently is the annual goals, the GM goals that we approved. And so if you remember 2 years ago, we did a major update to that, and we went through a discussion of it. The policy right now for strategy simply says we will assemble a strategic plan every 5 years. Our view is we update the strategic plan every year. So it's not a useful policy. If we want to, our thought process and our view is that the mechanism is the goals are really driving the strategy of the organization, rather than just saying, hey, you got to have a strategic plan every 5 years. That makes sense?
Yeah, the audience for that one is kind of an audience of one in terms of the general manager being responsible for setting the strategy versus some of these are relevant for the entire population of the organization.
Well, as we talked about before, the general manager goals are the corporate goals.
But Greg.
Yeah, but you're not gonna hold like somebody walking in the door, in accounting or something responsible for making sure there's a strategy for the organization, right? That's the general manager, but you might hold that same person responsible for
a portion
identity theft prevention or something like that. So that's only my point. I'm arguing for why the procedure in that case makes a little more sense than a policy.
Just a quick comment. I don't know if the structure of maybe some of these policies and procedures might apply. And many places have, that your employee handbook is, this is the way, this is the dress code, expectation. They're all considered there where, we separate, maybe there's something to think about separating those two. And then that way they don't become a policy.
That might be the mechanism for procedures. You're exactly right.
Yeah, and then that way, certain expectations are set in that handbook, and then it could roll up a lot of things that might take certain things out of here. But I agree, certain policies would stay. Something how you bring it.
There's been mixed feelings on that in the 3 towns that I've worked in before. Some had, that type of thing. Others did not want it at all and were advised by council not to have a employee handbook. So just to share that with you, it's not to kill the idea, but just to say there's reasons that are more recent that they say they don't.
I just come back to the strategy because we do capital investment over very long times, right? So we are doing investments for a very long time. And so if you set a goal, so it's just a question of how you think about it. If you're thinking year to year, you have to think year to year, but you also, because we are thinking long term. So I'm particularly sensitive about strategy having a long tail. And if you lose sight of that, then you become very focused on that year.
That's a good point too.
Yeah. So that's why I come back and I would really recommend you consider, you need to have a strategy because you're saying, I'm going to need a substation at a certain time. I need to do something about this whole location. That's strategy. That is strategy. And so it's not a procedure in my mind.
We're not. Well, yeah, and again, you're talking to the guy that loves strategy, right? Almost as much as power supply. So, and I say that with a smile, but I mean, the reason, if you look at all of our mission statements and everything that precedes everything, we repeat that strategy over and over again in terms of in-territory generation. How do you manage transmission costs? How do you look at long-term power supply? All those factors come into it. So I think we are in complete agreement of the critical importance of strategy. What we're really talking about here is the mechanism to make sure that we do that.
There's also a third bucket here, but when there's things that involve what the board does or should know about, we should have a committee, then whoever's the next chair, to have the board looking at anything and maybe suggesting things, not just waiting for you to bring back what you think, although we want that too. Like I noticed at the end, you want to just delete the number 25, which does set up a way for us to be notified if there's allegations, which it's just frozen deleted. I think there should be a committee of the board that would do that. That would look at anything that has to do with board actions or what the board gets notified of, or the board responsibilities.
One general thing is, and Susan is great at this. I'll give her all the credit in the world. Whether you call it a policy or procedure, all about structure. And call it what you want, as long as you have them, you have structure. And I think she brought that to the town of Wilmington. She brought that to RMLD. Or try to bring it to the town of Wilmington, but she brought it to RMLD. And so you can call it what you want, but as long as there's an oversight of the board of commissioners, the general manager, HR, then you have control, and that's all it's really about. So that's my 2 cents on it.
Got it. Kelly?
This was just a discussion, right? So, yeah.
Right, we're gonna skip, so we as we talked about before, we'll do the green community stuff via email, and then we'll do a formal presentation on March 26th, or the next March meeting for that vote. Okay. So we'll jump to the general manager update.
Sure.
I know it's getting late, so we'll just hit a couple of key points here. Let's go advance the next slide. Yeah. So we're nearly finished filling out the team. We hired a control room operator. As you guys remember, the control room operator is we have a team of 5. Our control room is covered 24/7. It's always staffed. It does, as we've talked about many times before, the staffing of that does impact overtime to a significant degree. So the good news is we've hired a control room, so we're fully staffed. There's a 6-month training process to that. We also hired a system engineer to add to the engineering team, which is a great addition. Thank you. And we, as we talked about, as you guys have reinforced, and we are in complete agreement, the importance of communications. So we are in the process of posting a marketing communications coordinator to be part of our marketing team. And then we're also posting in the IRD, Ray, an energy program specialist. We used to call it an analyst 1, but anyways, part of the team's Megan and Susan and the rest of the group, and how do you make it more relevant and interesting. So it's an energy program specialist. You guys, back on the 27th of January, we're asking about some of the legislative and regulatory and community engagement type stuff. And what the results are. We are specifically talking about some key projects and funding. It's a follow-up to the December 5th meeting we had. One of the senators wasn't able to make it. It's going to be in next week. In terms of awareness, Megan had discussed a while back some modifications or some additional options we're trying to make to our heat pump program. And this is a no interest loan. It would be in lieu of a cash rebate. But we're doing that with a Ready Co-op bank. So trying to work with local businesses, which is good. So on March 12th, we'll have a ribbon cutting. We'll make sure you guys are aware of it as well. It'll be late afternoon. And then as a follow-up to the December 5th meeting that we had here at River Park, which is an industrial park in the middle of our territory. That's where the first set of the additional battery systems are going in place. There's 2 5-megawatt battery systems. Those are nearly commissioned right now. They'll be fully commissioned in March. And we're going to do a ribbon cutting, just kind of a nice big program. Key audience are both legislative and regulatory, in particular, because as we go into the next phase, which is the longer term ones, we're looking for them to provide additional cash and capital and regulatory flexibility to make those programs work as well. So there's a lot of stuff happening on community and regulatory stuff. You guys are aware, and we're in the process. You guys are in the process of setting up your emails. IT is available for those of you that are still looking to do your setup. Our goal, just to kind of a heads up, is to fully transition the communication to be off of personal emails and into the RMLD email by the end of March. So after our last board meeting. So please get to it. But just big picture.
So let me ask you a question on that, Greg. I am not going to set up my email. Is that going to hold up the rest of the board?
I don't think so, Ray.
It makes no sense for me to set it up.
I don't think so, only because I understand. If depending upon we'll look at the calendar and the transition associated with that, only because I think next month might be your last meeting.
Yep, next month will be my last meeting.
Okay, well, in that case, then we kind of designed the 31st to work around you. So we've already accommodated it.
We'll be leaving together, Phil.
After 38 years, next month will be my last meeting.
I was chasing you, but I only got to 10.
Yeah, so.
As we talked earlier about power supply, and so these are just some of the interesting elements there's some interesting data here. The real message behind this slide is that power supply, it remains a high priority. We're doing risk management. And as Megan mentioned earlier, it's a very dynamic market. And Bob, you kind of brought it up, right? Natural gas is going through all sorts of, right now it's high, but anyways, there's a lot of dynamic nature of it. Pam, you mentioned, right, a higher bill, right? So as we talked about earlier, right, a monthly bill is driven by two factors: usage in terms of kilowatt hours for residential. There's demand piece for some of the C&I accounts, but usage and then what the rates are. And so January 25th was cold. That coldness continued into February. Just to give you, it doesn't look like a big difference, but the recent 10-year average was 31.56. And January average was 29.55. 2 degrees. Was that really a big difference? Well, it did have a big impact. It basically drove not only our load, but regional loads up about 8% in January. So pretty significant. And it was driven by weather specifically.
8% versus
versus what we budgeted. Back to the budgeted piece forecast.
I was reading where it says 8% above January.
Oh, I'm sorry, 8% above January 2024. Yes, budget versus yes. So that's on the load side. And Ray, you mentioned this at the last couple of meetings, right? That we're balancing dynamic load and then dynamic supply. So this is exactly a point in the month of January where it was a windy month, but it was also a cold month. And there's a couple other factors driving it, but hydro was down below forecast and wind was up. And so, there's a whole bunch of implications in terms of the mix between those two and the timing between those two and the reasons between those two. The point being is that, again, it's something we need to actively manage, especially when we have renewable resources, which are inherently intermittent.
Well, there's a lot of hydro in my yard right now, which will probably get into the groundwater and into your river.
Looking forward to that.
So I'm more, my question with that is, as we look to the spring where we will see hydro starting to come up, but we'll also see demand come down.
Yep.
How are we managing that side of the demand supply?
Well, so in both of those, we looked, as we talked about before, right? We will probably be in a situation where we have more supply than load in the month of April and possibly May, not March. And then we look at, what's the implication of there's a bunch of factors. Net from a net dollar perspective, we're still ahead of the game as we look at an overall year.
Okay.
The other element here, so this is part of the reason why we looked at in this very volatile market. Historically, we used to be, when the market was very stable, we used to be at 60% hedge. Obviously, over the past several years, we've moved to roughly 90% hedge. This is a good example where in late December, the forward price curve was about 100. The forecast for January, again, the following month, was $105 a megawatt hour. That ATC is around the clock. There's on peak and off peak, but just the details. The big message is when we actually got into January, it got colder than planned, and then the ATC or the open market price was $135 a megawatt hour, right? And those numbers are, our average contracted is less than half of that. So as those prices get higher and higher, our our customers' bills are dampened with that kind of impact. And as you look at the website, you can see we didn't have a lot of high push, while costs were higher, we dampened the high cost. Anyways, the key point is that our hedging position was the customers significantly benefited. If we were a much more open market, your several $100 bill would be significantly higher than that. So anyways, I gave you this just to give you just a little bit of snapshot in terms of the dynamic nature. We'll do a more detailed power supply in the next several months. But this is just, again, reinforcing why managing power supply is so important.
So Greg, one quick thing, because I never even thought about, like, I always knew weather affected wind and solar, but I never really thought about hydro. So is it because the rivers freeze and they can't run
Spring
the hydro?
runoff.
I never even thought about that.
No,
Yeah.
but exactly. So it gets really cold and
droughts, I guess, but
well, you get droughts as well, but hydro has its, everyone has its unique capability.
Yeah.
No melt. Yeah.
But the other, but the freezing temperature also affects the ability of them to pump out during January, potentially. And this year was particularly cold. The other thing that we haven't talked about lately, but several years back, some of you remember, we were looking specifically at different hydro contracts to making sure they weren't all on the same watershed area. They weren't on the same river, right? And so we've geographically tried to spread those around as well. So there's a bunch of, when we talk about risk management, and we did a lot of discussion on that last fall, and we'll do it again. But there's a lot of factors that go into how you manage the risk associated with contracts. We have roughly 30 contracts, which is a lot, but part of it is risk management. Any final questions? Okay. Dave, back to you.
All right. Well, we had, this was a discussion. It was significant emails from you last night to the whole board. That also forwarded an email from Chris Pollard that he had sent to me. So we took a vote on February 12th about 3 areas of performance that we felt were less than satisfactory. That occurred, and Chris's email, and then you echoed it, said that this meant it was leads to discipline, but the contract doesn't say anything about that, or that it meant it was a PIP. And again, the contract doesn't say. All your contract says is we shall provide a list in writing, period, end of story. So we all read the emails.
Great, as long as you all read the email,
right, we did.
Decide what path you want to go
and
down.
Then I just want to point out also that Chris's note didn't mention that I'd had 2 conversations with him about, well, how do we do that, and included you on one. So it was an effort to try to say, well, what is our process for doing that? If we wanted to do something in writing, how would we do it? And so that was why I reached out to them, and we actually had a productive call, and maybe to do a live edit on a Zoom meeting. So at this point, it's really just like, how do we turn what we talked about into that, what could be a brief written list? I gave you a 200-word version as a, so
everybody has it.
Oh, they do. Okay. So
well, it was part of the package.
Okay.
You guys just, this is all you now.
How do we, sure. So, I mean, how or what do we do?
Sorry.
Ray?
Oh, no, good.
Let me start.
Yeah.
Seniority has its privilege.
I bow to the,
even
one more month, the youngest powers to the.
I respect you more than you think I do. So.
First, I thank Chris for the memo, because it made clear at our discussion, we really didn't know, we had not been able to review the particular section 4.5. So this memo kind of, allowed me to review what 4.5 says. As I understand it here, if we adopt what you wanted to adopt, that kind of starts a clock running for 6 months in potential disciplinary action. I'm not gonna be around in 6 months, but if the improvements don't come back, the board could terminate the general manager in 6 months. But if I have that wrong,
it's just not stated in the contract in any way.
The other thing that's going on is, I don't know how much you're aware, but there are union negotiations going on right now. And it would be a very bad thing to weaken the general manager in union negotiations. He has presented 2 items here, two pathways in terms of what I got. And let me just find it where I got it here. In terms of, we can either rescind the 2 motions, or we can just say that the January 27th is the review. We covered all those items, and those seem pretty straightforward to me. That those set the items that you should be aware of, and should address going forward. So I think that, you know, in terms of what I have is the second pathway, in terms of the motion there, that we move that the board approved the January 27th to open session minutes and those services on minutes 2024 written performance review.
Well, I think we have a different meeting that we're talking about. Ray, we're gonna say something?
Well, yeah, we've been in this process now for several months. So the idea of a clock or something starting, I think we've talked about areas of improvement and how to do it. We've talked about solutions and they're in your goals for next year.
Yeah.
So I don't see a 60-day or 6-month clock kicking in. I think they're incorporated in those goals. And just, we've got the team, we've addressed some of the issues. You know, I don't see that being the driver. As a board, we only have so much power. And one of the few powers we have is give feedback to the general manager.
Agreed.
And I do not see it being a failure to give the general manager strong feedback. It would send the message that the general manager gives weak feedback to the people that they're reporting to. So if we give strong feedback to the general manager and the general manager says to whoever they're negotiating with, this is important. I've been hit on this. We've got to manage these costs because the board has established that this is important. Then you're going to have to relay that message down the chain. I don't think that weakens any negotiating position. I think it strengthens it in terms of energy, staff, and communications, which are the 3 basic categories. So if the board says to you that these are the 3 categories that are really, really important, that we didn't do well in 2024, they're on my goals for 2025, I fail to understand how that weakens the negotiating position. I think it strengthens it because those are then the messages you have to relay downstream, that this is what the board has put priority on. So the negatives that have been presented to me, I don't see them as being limiting. And I would rather see the board accept its responsibility as giving the manager feedback, supporting the manager in achieving that goal and objective going forward, but not fail to give strong feedback. So I would say it's been a process, Greg. We've been through a number of things a number of times. We spent some extra time on the 12th of February to kind of go over this. Let's take the minutes of the February 12th as our final feedback, and the performance reflect goals or outcomes are those things that are reflected in your goals, and as the outcomes, I don't.
Is there anything that should be taken away from the January 27th feedback?
Well, I think it both really. I mean, I think both. It's been a process. You had the 27th, you digested it, you gave us a sheet back.
We established
and then we digested that and said, well, I think the way I see it is this didn't include that and this didn't include that, and we still want more in these things, and there were some edits that came out of that. To me, it's collective. As far as written feedback, I would propose we just take the minutes of the February 12th as the written feedback. And
January 27th and February 12th.
Well, it could be both, but collectively, yes.
But we did, on the 12th, we specifically had ones of less than 7.
Yeah, it has to be inclusive of the 12th,
Okay,
for sure,
so
but they can include the 27th.
Are you making a motion?
Yes, I can put forward a
Sure.
motion if that.
Please.
Yeah, so just add, in terms of Ray suggested, you got the suggested motion number 2 there in front of you.
I have one, but it's consistent with
Just add
Plan A.
the February 12th minutes to
Well,
that.
why don't you read your,
Well,
whatever you have,
let me
Ray?
just quick.
We had a meeting on the 12th.
Yeah,
that was
let me just-
specifically about 3 areas. And the question has been, what do we do with that meeting?
Yeah, let me just,
It's right here. Introduction, right there.
that's it.
Plan A, Plan B, Path A.
Yeah, just add on plan,
Well,
the B.
Just
On
let
Item
Ray
2,
say what
just add the
All right,
February
I
12th.
I
minutes.
have some suggested language, and I'm reading what is put here, and I get what you're saying, Phil. I'm not.
Okay.
Phil's on that one. Just add February.
Yeah,
Well,
it's this one he wants to add, and we want to add
Or
January.
you can take Dave's memo if you want to take it
I
as,
think you-
just add it.
Well, it's my statement.
The second option.
The second option.
Well, those aren't the only two. I mean, those are things that Greg put forward, but we can also make our own motions.
All right, right, right. I understand. I'm just taking pieces of input here and want to, all right. Both are quite similar. So,
But-
there's option A, which is what I am
If you say I'm gonna be that.
taking as a base,
Oh, I went.
and move that the Reading Municipal Light Board of Commissioners approve the summary written list of areas of gym performance that were less than satisfactory based on the January 27th, 2025 and February 12th, 25 regular session meeting minutes as approved by the Board of Commissioners.
So can you say that again?
Say that again?
All right. Move that the RMLD Board of Commissioners approve the summary written list of GM performance that were less than satisfactory based on the January 27th, 2025 and February 12th, 2025 regular session meeting minutes as approved by the Board of Commissioners. Because there's going to be a meeting minutes.
They don't exist, but okay.
Well, they don't exist yet.
Is there any second on that?
So I'm not sure what you're actually approving.
Well, can we have he made a motion. Do we have a second?
I'm sorry, I didn't really fully understand.
I don't fully
Yeah.
understand the motion.
Well,
Yeah,
let's,
so that's
okay,
what
let's
my-
hear the motion and
That's
see
why
if
I
there's a
don't
second.
second it until I get to understand the motion.
So what the motion intent is that we are approving the areas of GN performance be based on the meeting minutes from the January 27th and February 2025, February 12th, meeting minutes. So we're not writing something up, we're referencing those meetings as the basis of our.
I
written
heard you
meeting.
say before that to summarize the written list of areas that were less than satisfactory when you said it the
Make
first
sure you
time.
get that in there,
Well, I mean, it's what he said the
Well,
first
yeah,
time.
I was going off,
Make
it
sure you
was
get
hit
it.
this,
please.
I mean, it's what he said the first time.
So Ray, you're probably better off if you do, you can do whatever you want, but if you take some motion number 2 there and just add in the February 12th, 2025 to the January 27th, I think.
you like that language better?
I think you've accomplished what you're trying to do.
All right. We'll try again.
You want me to read? the
We don't
motion?
have to do a written, we already had a big, long meeting with
Right,
60 comments.
yeah,
The only thing that written list would be if there was things that were less than. That's the only thing that the contract said we would do a written list on. So either we do that or we do
all
nothing.
right, no, this is fun. I'm agreeing with Phil. Let's starting from scratch. Hi, I'm Ray Porter. Move that the Reading Municipal Light Board of Commissioners approve that the January 27, 2025 and February 12, 25 open session meeting minutes serve as the general manager's 2024 written performance review. I think that's right. Yeah, I think
I'll
that's,
second that.
So,
those
okay, so
meeting minutes serve as the written performance review. That's
we're not doing a list, even what,
embedded that are lists,
Okay.
embedded in those meeting minutes are
Okay.
definitely 3 things that we
Okay.
thought and discussed and voted on, actually. So,
well, yeah, that's the thing, we
So-
voted on a list.
so the meeting minutes would have specific voted on
Okay.
language.
Did we move and second it?
Yeah, I second it.
Okay, we're ready for, we're ready for a vote on that? Any other comments? Okay,
All right.
all in favor?
Aye.
Um,
No.
maybe just recommendation,
Yeah.
we could sit down. Right, our side. And come up with a way for every year going forward, like. With some pain processes here, and I think it's a process, Greg, we all get feedback, and that I think the second one was feedback, constructive feedback, right? And we come back, we all get good things, we get things we can improve on. I think that's the point, right?
Yeah.
Where the point is.
And I think, just to be clear, I'm more than welcome to constructive feedback.
So.
I'm
okay,
reacting to the
One of the
context
things, one of
of
the things I would suggest
August
is,
22nd,
when
and that's
Dave-
why I pushed back.
yeah,
Yeah,
when
yeah.
Dave Hennessy was a board member, he and both Tom O'Rourke were actually personnel people.
Mhm.
They created some sort of system. I don't know if we
Yeah.
could
We can
look up
recommend
that,
yeah.
dig up that system somewhere.
Okay.
Because he talked about something doing on a
Yeah.
regular basis, as opposed to
Yeah.
once a year.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I just think, you know, because we do
Charlie,
the
it's a-
review in
Yeah, no,
public, right? And
that's what we said.
that public review, it could be, that's the feedback, right?
Right.
Mr. Chair, one last thing.
Yeah.
At the next meeting, I request some time at the beginning of the meeting.
I will
I
give you
have-
more than time. I'm gonna throw the gavel your way, my friend.
Okay.
So,
Because
Can I just-
I worked on the chronology of each.
no,
of
no,
the
well,
things.
you're gonna be
So-
you're gonna be the master of
I
ceremony.
was hoping to present
I just want to do one piece of housekeeping on what we just did. And I'd just like to move that the document that's to be produced by the previous motion shall include within it the list of the 3 items that were deemed less than satisfactory on the February 24th meeting. Just to be clear that it includes that. That's my motion. Move that the performance review that results from the foregoing motion from January 27th and February 12th shall include the 3 items that the board voted as being less than satisfactory. We voted on it. So is there a second on that motion?
Come on, man.
No.
Is there a second on the motion that it will include the 3? So it's not going to include the 3, so we're erasing that?
I'm not seconding the motion because by definition, those meeting minutes
Okay,
talked about 3 items.
Okay.
If we vote on the 3 items, they'll include it. I don't see
Stipulate that.
anything more. I don't see a need
Okay.
to second or vote on it.
All right.
It's inclusive by definition.
all right, then, okay, so no second and no vote on that.
Right,
Just
not
an
second.
understanding. Is it an understanding that it does?
I think
I'm just making sure. Cause I don't know how it's gonna,
Let's adjourn, Mr.
you know,
Chair.
before we adjourn, I just like for this purpose of this complicated minutes approval, I think we need a couple of,
I'm on the clock.
can we have,
That's right. I'm on
Bill, with great respect for your service, maybe could one of you serve as, or both, or 2 people serve as board secretary other than me to go through this 2 thing and go through whatever this, or we just leave, it feels like a lot to hand to Erica to do.
Oh, no, we'll do the same
Yeah,
process.
no,
Okay.
Mr.
We'll do
Chairman,
exactly the same process.
I certainly will be objective in any.
No, it's fine. It's not about you, it's just, I was thinking,
You know, I'd be more than happy to share it with either Pam or maybe I'll share it with Ray, the minutes.
All right.
I think that may be the appropriate thing.
yeah,
to
just
share-
having 2
to share the
people,
minutes with Ray.
have 2 people
Okay.
who put their heads to it.
Those 2, though, because we already approved the January 27th minutes.
Yeah.
The February 12th minutes, we can share with Ray.
Just for clarity. Yeah, just for clarity. So did I hear it correctly? Because contractually, I'm now on the clock. Are you saying I'm not on the clock?
I'm saying there's a single sentence in,
Or just yes or no? Am I on the clock or not?
well, it's not clear what we
Me,
just
no.
voted
No,
for.
to me, no.
Okay, so the rest of you guys need to decide because it has, this discussion tonight has huge implications. You just need to make sure I'm hearing very clearly.
Right.
I have the feedback,
Sure.
okay?
You have the
But
feedback.
But you guys are
incorporated
making
the
decisions on
goals.
contractual, so yes or no?
Well,
Yeah.
that's why I think if we didn't vote on it,
No doubt, that's a different discussion point.
Right.
You're asking us something, now you're making us make a legal decision without, we don't have counsel. You had counsel look at that. This is where it all goes to all the time. You had counsel look at that and advise on what we were asking for. Chris Pollitt writes a large email and we were taking something that this all started because it's something we did not notice that, again, it says it in the contract, right? And
Yeah.
it says, give you written feedback. Okay, we're trying to follow it. That's your contract. You gave it to us.
Yep.
Okay, you get Chris Pollitt to write this massive email back
So
again.
Bob,
And now you're telling us, we have to,
Sorry, Chris is on the call and he does.
he's on the call.
Yeah.
But again, it comes back to us, right? And that was just, again, we're making simple things complicated.
agreed, we don't.
Okay, but now you're asking us to make a statement about that we have nothing, I have no knowledge of. You can't tell me to say yes or no, and I don't know what that means to me or what that decision process is, right? So I wanna back up there and just say, all we're trying to do is just do a review and follow a process that we said, okay, Greg, we said some things that you can improve on. Your contract says, we have to give you that in writing. It said it in black and white. Now Chris comes back and says, oh, no, it doesn't. It says it right there. That's all we followed. Now now you're asking us to say yes or no. Nothing that we said put you on a clock. Nothing that I said, anybody here said that. Okay?
I said the opposite, that we've
The opposite.
incorporated into your goals, into the things that moving forward, that things are already in place for managing
We're already
many of
doing
these
stuff.
issues. And I don't see any clocks here. I think we've addressed the issues, we've defined the issues, the meeting minutes have been writing. I really don't even know why we're having this conversation.
All it is, and we need to come up, because every time we think we're taking a step forward, we're taking a step back. Because again, language and lawyers and everything gets involved, right? We're just going through a simple, a process where we're trying to get something done. I think we did it. We attempted to satisfy Chris's letter. Right, and again, I'll let Chris speak now, and speak too much, but I think that was the whole point of what Ray just did, so. I'll listen to it.
Yeah, hi. Good evening, commissioners. I just wanted to point out there's no magic to giving the general manager feedback. You can do it informally, you can do it verbally, you can do it in writing. You can do it however you think is most appropriate in the circumstances. The significance of the language in section 4.5 is when you've deemed basically the general performance of the manager to be less than satisfactory, and you need something to happen about it in a 6-month period. And if that 6-month and if it doesn't happen within that 6-month period, then you're going to be taking some sort of action. So if that's, and what I'm hearing from the board is that's not the intent. So because of the contract, just because the contract doesn't contain language that prohibits you from providing comments in writing, doesn't mean that you can't provide comments in writing without triggering section 4.5. So I think that's the point that I wanted to communicate. There seems to be a misunderstanding that if the board wants to provide written feedback, that it has to trigger section 4.5 of the contract. That's not true.
But the thing is, Chris, section 4.5 has a single sentence that says we shall provide him a list in writing of what those are. It doesn't say that therefore means if something doesn't happen in 6 months, X happens after that. It's completely silent on anything. You've said in your email that means he's subject to discipline. There's absolutely nothing in the contract about discipline, or that it's putting him on a PIP. The contract says nothing about us being able to put the general manager on a PIP. So that's just something in your email.
That's just how that works in the labor and employment context.
I think your firm reviewed the contract before, back. I mean, I think it was your colleague. And you're saying it says something that it's not said in the contract.
I'm not sure there's any disagreement, Dave. I think the board wants to provide written feedback. My only point is you can provide written feedback without triggering section 4.5. There's no need to reference section 4.5 unless you've got a 6-month performance metric in mind, which, hearing from the commissioners, you don't have that in mind.
Well, all it says is actions which we believe he could take to improve things in a 6-month period. And then it stops then. It doesn't say anything after that.
Meeting minutes of February 12th do not mention specifically 4.5. I think we do mention the 3 areas of written feedback, which now is in the form of those meeting minutes. And why can't we stop talking about this?
Right, yes. Mr. Chairman, can we adjourn?
I mean, sure.
I'll move, CAB should adjourn first.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Oh, schedule, wait for it.
Schedule.
Yeah.
You're March the 26th.
Can we do, can we potentially look at April?
Well, you can look at April for me all you want.
Amen.
As of April 8th, I'm gone. I'm surprised that the new gentleman who's running has not come to this meeting. I'm a little surprised a little bit.
April 23rd, which is so Wednesday. So I know we've kind of shifted in terms of dates. 3rd week of April starts the 21st. Oh, that's school vacation week. Okay, let's not do that. How about the week of the 28th, which is the 29th or the 30th? Or May 1st?
either of the last 2 weeks of April, I'll have to phone in from France.
Ooh,
What about the 16th?
why don't we just all go with me there?
Do 16th.
We did the 16th.
16th
Anybody have a
will work.
problem?
That works.
I'll probably be dead by the 16th.
That's Wednesday.
I'm out by the 31st, so.
Hey,
the paperwork tonight.
Dead from tax,
16th.
31st.
Oh, yeah, that's the day after.
Yeah, the day after.
Oh, you will be.
What'd you say?
April 16th.
Sure.
Actually,
April
I-
16th.
in truthfulness, I probably will miss it. I probably miss
Come
coming,
back in.
but you know, the time has come.
Public.
I cannot serve, you know, another, I would have to commit to another 3-year term. And I can't guarantee I'd be around for 3 years.
Okay.
I found a place in Wilmington that I love, so I may be moving there.
So hey,
all
I'm
electric.
stepping down as CAB. If we can work, move to Wilmington. You can be on the CAB. Problem solved. That's it. The name tag moves from there to here.
Did we decide on the 16th?
6 o'clock?
Okay.
That work?
Bob, does 6 work, or do you wanna try to go a little later? I just feel like,
No,
you said,
no, six-
you
I-
said 6 is like kinda close.
No, six is fine. I'm okay with 6. I just had a commitment that I could not.
Do you wanna go for May also?
Yeah. Pardon me? What's this?
No, I can't do the week of May 19th.
Could I just ask a quick question? Just in the interest of not ever having to discuss this again or think about it again, I'd just like to say, if these minutes are produced and there is reference to that section, if we don't say what we mean, then we're going to be asking again what we mean. I took away a reference to that section from Dave, and I think assuming that it isn't in there could be troublesome, because if it is, we're going to be looking back at you and saying that's not what you intended, because you indicated tonight it's not what you intended. So as the HR person, I just want clarity on, is that what you intended?
So,
I can clarify something, sorry, I will clarify that the motion was pursuant to section 4.5, according to the transcript. So that stuff, that was in there.
Motion? Into the motion.
And I do think that means what, to me, that meant, and you all know that, what Chris felt it meant to me in my experience.
well, and again, that's.
Okay.
That's what Chris felt like it meant. I think I think he clearly intent here, right? Now we're getting into one of our legal issues versus non-legal issues that, again, that we seem to get our circular paths, right? We get these vortexes.
Yeah, it's
we
true.
can't get out of it, right? And I just think we have intent. We're trying to provide some written feedback. It may state that in there, but I think, Greg, here's our intent, right?
I do.
So,
And I think to answer you specifically, Susan, you know, because there's no second sentence after that sentence in his contract, okay. First of all, I don't know that we've come out of this with a process for producing the list with the actions. I don't think that happened tonight. I could have, but it didn't. So, okay, but something's gonna happen now, some mishmash of minutes. I don't know what it's gonna look like. And then even if there is in there a list and actions, the contract doesn't say, you know, of course, you know, what happens in month 7 if we don't think something happened by month 6, it says nothing about it.
That may be precisely why we don't use it and we just give the feedback, because I do
Maybe.
think it says
Good
very
point.
clearly 6 months.
You're right.
And that's it is putting him on a clock, and we just want to be really clear
Sure.
that we know he's on a clock, if he's on a clock.
Right, but I mean, it doesn't say anything about whether it matters if it's 7 months or doesn't happen. It just said, this is things we'd like you to do in 6 months. It said, and then it's silent, which would be nice if it wasn't, right?
well, I think one of the things that we asked Greg to do, part of that was to provide the board feedback. Right, over the course,
Right.
over the course of the next couple of meetings, and that's one of the.
And
things that
It's also why, let me just get this out. Okay, it's also why I saw 2 meetings with Chris to say, okay, we took this vote. How do we render the vote into a proper list that we then all agree on, which could include significant feedback from Greg about what the list is and what the actions are. And that's the conversation I had with Chris and Greg a week and a day ago. And now, but something different happened where the proposal was, oh, just substitute January 27 minutes as if February 12th didn't even happen. And then a big memo about how we can't do this and we should rescind. If we had just had the Zoom meeting to go through and finish this 300-word memo and agree on it, we wouldn't be here right now. But that didn't happen. But I'd still be open to having that 30-minute Zoom meeting to hammer out.
We'll do it again.
Well, I mean, we could have done it tonight. We could have done it Monday, like you said last week, and we didn't.
So just to be real clear.
Yeah.
I will state very emphatically, I am dedicated to this organization. Listen to me very carefully. All right. I took the feedback. I've been working on the feedback. I've been working on this stuff for 6 months. We talked, and so when we made a lot of progress on several elements. I will continue to serve at the pleasure of the board as long as the board wants me to be here. So that is my commitment to the organization, to you, but also to the organization. Because at the end of the day, my responsibility is to follow under your direction, but I am serving the community and I am doing the best of my ability to take care of our employees. That is my commitment until my last day here. You guys get to decide when that is. That's all. That needs to be very clear. You heard this earlier, how I interacted with Mr. Charlie, right? That's how I run the business, all right? You understand how I manage the financials. Our financials are excellent, right? It's a team effort. Is our team perfect? No. But anyways, all said and done. So you guys say no thanks. I will do my best. That's period. So again, I'll stop there. I'll just stop there. I think things will be a little bit different going forward. Should be great. Okay. Go to May 26th, 27th, 28th. You guys want to try and make a cut at that? Do you guys know your schedules well enough?
Sounds fine to me.
28th is a Wednesday.
May? Yeah, or 21st or
No, I'm good then. I'm good.
Oh, okay.
28 is after Memorial Day.
Actually,
A couple days, not that that may matter.
Is it Memorial Day 28th?
26th.
Oh, 26th, you're right.
May 27th is better than 28th is tough for me.
The 27th is fine, actually.
27th or 29th. Yeah.
Either one's okay for me. Anybody have any preferences? If Vex has only got the limitation, we'll do it on the 29th. Okay, there you go. 29th? 6 o'clock? Good? Not a word to you.
I got it. I'd like to say something before tonight's over, as this my last meeting. Thank you to everyone on the Board of Commissioners, the CAB, every employee here.
Yes.
It's been a great run. And, you know, I've learned a lot about power, electricity that I never even knew I needed to learn. But thank you for everything. It's been fantastic.
You've been awesome.
Wait, are you not going to be there next week? Next month?
Next month, you didn't make them for it next month. You did April.
March 26th.
Oh, it's already on the schedule.
March 26th, I have 2 meetings.
Whoa. Lamb. Sorry.
Yeah, as of right now, March 26th, I have 2 meetings. But, we'll see if.
What time do they finish? Can you come at all?
First one starts at 6:30.
Can you come for 10
Yeah.
minutes
Um,
and then leave? Okay. Or should we start at 5:30?
bourbon.
I could use one right now.
Will you allow us the opportunity to say thank you?
I'll try to see what I can do to, the
6 to 6:10.
But I just wanted to make sure I said it tonight just in case.
We thank you. No, we also.
If I can, when we get closer, I'll take a look. Now again, it's been at least 10, if not 11 years, so it's been good run.
Thanks for all your feedback. Yeah.
You breaking in your procurement knowledge and
Oh,
understanding
yeah.
how municipality runs and the impact of all the stuff, like tonight, your point about 100% electrification and just the charge, what the implication of that just, I never thought of the TOU on that would be unbelievable, right? Because you're just talking about a penalty, right? And there's nothing you can do, right? It's a municipal building. They're all like that. Kind of eye-opening statement, but that's what we're gonna miss.
Appreciate it. Who knows, I come back as a surprise guest sometime.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, Dennis, you've brought a lot to the table. So I thank you from
Appreciate
my
it.
standpoint.
Okay, I learned a lot from you, man.
Thank you, Brad. I appreciate that. You gonna miss it when you're gone?
I will. This was a hard one to leave. Cause I do enjoy
Yeah.
the group. There's some great banter and things.
I
that
know
goes
exactly
on.
what you're talking about.
But, you know, it was a hard one, but I don't think it's fair to the community or the group if I can't show up for 3 months straight. And I'm looking at the next 3 months and going, yeah, how do I fit this in? And then to my family, it's been Monday through Thursday. So I'm home 9 o'clock, 9:30 every night. So, but it's tough one to leave, I'll tell you that. I'm emotional. I'm crying. I could. Yeah. Emotional guy.
So then you move to adjourn the CAB.
Yeah, emotional adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Motion to adjourn, Mr. Chair?
I welcome the motion. Yep. Second by Pam, all in favor of adjourning? Okay, thank you.
Thank you all.
Oh, yeah. Yes. I know.
Bob, could you just take it?
Pretty sure.
So we've got, and we're doing something with, John Jarvis.
Yeah, that's in the evening.
Yeah.
Yeah.